including game jams, some really new service stuff that I think we're going to have a pretty interesting discussion on, and some VR and a couple other, I think, pretty fun topics. So welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out and joining us. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, the subscribe, and go share the stream if you're watching us live, or if you watch it later, go share it and drop a comment and say hello. Anyway, thanks for joining us, guys. I got David right above me from Warped Imagination. You can go check out his channel down below. He's got cool tech stuff. He builds all kinds of crazy robots, VR stuff, and games and companies, all kinds of stuff. Just check him out. Jason's story is up over in my diagonal direction. Go donate to his coffee page, and definitely subscribe to his channel. I think you've got like a couple thousand subscribers off of 2 videos or something.
Hey, it's 3 videos. We're getting there. It's slow but steady. We're getting there.
Like slow, but the quality is good. So you're not going to get spammed with a bunch of junk. It's just all good, high quality stuff. And then Andrew over here from Infinity PBR, and anybody who's used Unity in the asset store at all has seen some of Andrew's really cool stuff, like the dragons and the characters, the RPG stuff, and all of the streams that you've been doing lately, showing off how to build out an actual RPG that you're going to release. So welcome, guys.
Hey, everyone.
Hello.
Anybody have anything they wanted to share or just jump into, talk about before we get started on some of the couple topics I wanted to discuss today?
Nope.
Any big events coming up? Well, let's talk real quick about the game jams, David. We were just talking about that a minute ago. You mentioned that you were doing a game jam over the weekend, right? And I just finished and submitted into one. I'm going to release a video on it probably tomorrow for this Lego game jam. So tell everybody about the one that you're doing real quick, and then I'll dive into this Lego one too.
Yeah, so this is the time of year where game jams just seem to be prolific. There's one on top of the other every weekend, it seems like. So I finished one a few weeks ago for a buddy of mine called Vimlock, called the Vim Jam.
Got his hoodie on right here.
Yeah, you got his hoodie on. Yeah, he's a good friend of mine. And we hung out the other day to do some brain control stuff, but that wasn't to do with the jam. We were just trying to get this brain controller working, and it was being a nightmare.
Remind me, by the way, I want to talk to you about that afterwards and talk to you and him about that. I have an idea to see if we can do some kind of a project that would be interesting, fun together on that brain control setup. So let's talk about that offline afterwards. I just don't want to forget about it.
Okay, yeah, we could do a project together on that. So I did Vim Jam. That was a very basic 3D game over 5 days with just basically you playing against an AI or playing against a local player with just a little strategy game where you play 2 characters and you fight off against each other with some dice rolling. And I've got a video up about that, but there's no commentary. That was literally just me chuck a video up on my channel about that one. I will do some more commentary about that, what goes into it and the design and everything a bit later on down the line after I finished all my other work. The jam at the moment I'm doing is the VR Super Jam. That is a 3-day jam to build a VR game with the theme being opposites. So that one's ongoing. That will finish tomorrow at 8 a.m. my time. That's LA. So we'll see how that comes out. I'll put a video up this week about that one. I'm doing some stuff with reflected avatars. So as you do things, you see yourself in reflection and you have to finish a puzzle in front of you. It's an interesting mechanic. I'll see how far I go with it. And then I'll chuck that up this week, hopefully, on my channel. So subscribe and you'll get that in. And I do lots of VR stuff on that. So recently I put up a vertical slice of the turret game that's actually coming out for Auto Mechanics. And that one is really tidy. And is a lot more professional than Game Jams.
That turret's like a big giant... like you've got a whole big mechanical turret that they can see the video of where you're playing that game and blasting and stuff, right?
That's right. So that's the simulator behind me. So it's a full motion simulator with articulated arms that you get in and you basically hold on and you can actually fight as things are coming in. It's a bigger game. We're going to do a commercial release as well. So you'll be able to just play it on Oculus without having to have all the simulator. But the really high-end experience that we're actually going for You actually get into the simulator and you fight out as a turret shooter, in amongst other things. And it uses some art from quite a well-known concept artist called Gramuk Bassin, who gets listed on most of the videos that I put up for Autumn Mechanics and Autumn Imagination. And he actually used to be a concept artist for Star Citizen back in the Kickstarter days when they were kicking off. And his work is incredible. So a lot of the art assets you'll see are really high-end and they look really tidy.
That's kind of the case with most of the stuff that I see you do, though. Even your little programmer art ends up looking like high end and nice, though. I kind of like, oh, what the fuck is this? Like, you hire an artist, and like, no, Dave's just hacking away in the corner there in the middle of a game jam, making crazy ass art while writing code. So it's cool stuff.
I was lucky. I worked at Sony for around 6 years as a lead tools programmer, as well as a tech producer. And I got to work with some absolutely incredible artists, and I would sit down on a lot of occasions and actually do art with them. And they would teach me how they do characters, how they do cars, how they do all this sort of thing. And I was lucky enough to get some real in-depth tutorials from some amazing people, and they now lead game studios at Rocksteady, at Rockstar, and all this sort of thing. So I was very lucky I got to do that. And so I get into Maya and I can do the 3D modeling myself, which is handy, but I'm definitely not as good as like Andrew or anything like that, but I can do some bits.
It's just when it comes to a programmer level, you're like in between programmer and artist for sure. At the very least,
it's definitely not programmer art. Yeah,
your programmer art is definitely better than a lot of junior artist art. I'll put it that way, or at least on par. Where my programmer art is on par with most kindergarten art. Maybe. I don't know. Some kindergartners I've actually met draw better than I do. So what are you going to do? On game jams, I mean, we met at a game jam and we've done a ton of game jams together. And I was just mentioning right before we started that I finished up a game jam yesterday. So I submitted my game into that Lego game jam yesterday, and I'm going to drop the link for the game into chat. So anybody who wants to try playing along and see if they can beat it while we're talking can have an opportunity. So did you guys, I think I briefly mentioned this game jam last week. Did you guys get a chance to take a look at it at all? The Lego Ninjago game jam?
I live vicariously through you. I just watched your streams a little bit.
Yeah. I watched a couple of your streams, but couldn't participate.
Anyway, I would say if anybody is looking to get into a game jam, they're accepting entries until the 5th. I would definitely check it out. And it's not like sponsored or anything. I actually had a lot of fun building a game with it because it had a couple cool things. One was that there was a lot of interesting assets already. So there was already stuff that I could use. I didn't have to pick out what art to go with. I didn't really have to do any art selection at all. I didn't have to be a good artist because I just was limited to just using those packs, or at least I limited myself to that. And then it already had a lot of functionality. So I was able to get 90% of the game working with like 3 lines of code and just hooking up some bricks and playing around. So I would say if you want to join a game jam, there weren't very many entries when I submitted mine in there. At least it didn't look like it. And it was a lot of fun to just build a quick little game where kids could actually play it and have fun. Out of all the game jam games I've built, I would say that this is probably one of the few that was actually kind of fun to play when I let little kids or like my wife actually play it. They continued through. That's happened like maybe 2 or 3 other times out of the dozens of game jams that I've played or done. So it was fun and interesting. And yeah, I just wanted to recommend it. Everybody go check it out and go try it and maybe submit something. Like I said, there weren't very many entries. Maybe you'll win and be featured in the Lego store. That's what they're doing. The winners are going to feature and just put the game into some Lego store installations and then send you a bunch of free Legos and stuff. And they got a cool Unity Lego minifig. Oh, anyway, that was all I had on this game jam.
About 15 years ago, probably 16 years ago, I went over to Lego in Denmark to go and meet the guys over there. And if you've ever been to Bouillon, is where it is. And that's a crazy place. The whole place where they build the Lego is all automated and roboticized then. So, yeah.
So I guess to transition off of this, there was one issue that I ran into while building this that we were loosely talking about earlier, which was with FMOD. So Jason's been a big fan of FMOD and been talking about it a lot. And I've been wanting to dive into it, get a little better with it, and then do a video on it. So I was like, okay, I'll implement FMOD into this game for this game jam, and use that as kind of like an experimentation point and a starting point to get things going. And then I figured I would use that as one of the benefits would be that it would let me have the audio or the music keep playing between the scene transitions, because I've got a little character selection scene and a main game scene. Unfortunately, it didn't work out so well. So I went through the process. Jason helped me get everything working, and I got it all working pretty well in the editor and on Windows. Everything was good. It took me maybe an hour to finally understand everything and just a couple lines of code change. It really wasn't too difficult to implement the changes. And I noticed some cool benefits there, like some of the things that Jason was talking about with the looping. I was playing with that and getting that working, and the events. And there was one other cool thing I was going to play with that I forgot what it was and I was going to tell you about. But anyway, long story short, I get it all working. Everything's good. I go to publish and I do my WebGL build. I upload it to Simmer and my game was completely silent. I was like, what the hell is going on? And then I refreshed and suddenly my game had sound. Then I refreshed again and my game was completely silent. And then I rebuilt, game was completely silent. And I kept running into problems where at first I was able to track it down. I went through the console and found it was just missing a bunch of audio files. So it was missing files that weren't in the built-in I forget what it is. You have to build what are those called? The
Oh yeah, sorry. When you build not the banks,
banks.
the
Yes.
yeah.
So I needed to build the banks and stuff. So that gave me some trouble. I rebuilt them and stuff. But eventually I found that one, it didn't fix my audio stuttering across scene loads in a WebGL build. Seems like it works fine in Windows, but it didn't help at all in my WebGL build. And two, the audio sounded a bit weird and distorted. And I guess three, I just ran into nonstop issues with it not properly working. I switched back to default Unity audio, which only gave me one problem, which was that I had to find that disable Unity audio checkbox. Once I found that and was able to re-enable it, everything was pretty easy to do. And everything just worked again just fine. So
I will say, in general, this is the double-edged sword, is that WebGL hates threaded anything. If you have anything in your code that relies on threads, it doesn't really work on account of the fact that your browser WebGL build isn't running in a threaded environment. And so it's kind of more of a consequence of the fact that FMOD is parallel doing work for you, which doesn't work in a non-parallel environment very well. So yes, I'll definitely give you that one, but that's, I guess, from my perspective. I did a couple of WebGL projects a while back, and I had such a nightmare trying to get it to work the way I wanted to that I just swore off WebGL builds in general. So I definitely, I'm not going to defend the combination of the two, because as far as I'm concerned, WebGL is a little bit half baked for my liking, so I tend to just leave it alone.
I think that's probably a fair argument, and I just really wanted to point that out because I needed to. Well, it was my first experience with it, and it was definitely the wrong way to go. I should have just done it in an actual like Windows game or something else that I wasn't pushing out as a WebGL thing. So really wanted to note that my FMOD experience is going to be slower. It's going to take me a bit longer to get into it because it didn't work well with this project, and I have to do it with another one. And if you're trying it yourself, don't try it with your WebGL.
And I'm not going to deny it's confusing the setup. It is a middleware, which means it's a third-party amp with a third-party installation, with an asset you need to get, with version numbers you need to match, with Unity version issues. It's not easy. Like, it's not a straightforward thing to do. But like anything, once you know how to do it, it's like I have saved a version of various different things I need. I can spin it up pretty quickly, but it won't be an easy start. The trade-off, of course, isn't once you get it in and working, the real benefit is that you can work in parallel. That to me is the most powerful part of it. You can just work on audio stuff and not have to reopen Unity and test things and move things around. You can just do all of that in mixes and testing and build, and then just connect it afterwards. And if you want to do a complete remastering of your game, you can do that without even compiling the game. You can literally swap the bank and just press play again, which is really cool. But yeah, like I said, that's all those benefits come with the cost of configuration and setup and all the other usual mess that goes with it.
Yeah, it was a little bit more than I had anticipated at first. I was thinking one click, just magic, and then no work at all. There was a bit of work and then a bit of undoing, but that's the source control is for, so it wasn't too difficult. I think we might get Salim joining us soon too, by the way. I'm gonna pop up chat here. I haven't popped this up before. There we go. Let's pop in Salim and pop up chat. Let's see what that looks like. Now we look nice and tiny. So one of the other things I wanted to talk about was the services stuff. The new services announcement that Unity released. I sent you guys an email about it a little while ago, and I think I put a. Hopefully, I remember to put a link in the description. But they did this big announcement about a new introduction to Unity gaming services. Let me just pop up the screen and I'll share it with everybody that's watching us live right now. They can get a quick view of what it looks like. So of what they announced. So they announced a bunch of different services. Some of these are new versions of existing stuff or just kind of announcements of the existing stuff. And then some seemed like they were actually like completely new services. If you look through here, they've got the cloud code functionality, which if you're not familiar with Lambdas, or I guess if you are familiar with Lambdas, they seem to be very much like Lambdas in AWS, or I forget Azure's version of that, where you can essentially set up a little bit of code and then run that code remotely with a web service call. And then they've got some integrations into Unity to make it a little bit easier to make that web service call. It's pretty much the gist of it from what I was able to tell. They're cloud saving to be able to save your players' data remotely, an economy system that had inventory and currency and all kinds of other stuff, and then some authentication. These all seemed relatively new to me. And then there were a couple things like they're doing new netcode, which they've had netcode multiple times, analytics and cloud diagnostic stuff. I think that's all been around for a while, and they're just kind of trying to integrate it all into one big package. There was a lot going on here and kind of a lot to discuss. Was there anything in this that you guys thought was interesting or something that you thought what you wanted to discuss or talk about first?
I was watching, I think, the Games from Scratch video and going over the pricing. I was thinking, I have no idea what this means. I mean, I understand the numbers of, how many, 5 million this or a million that, but in the idea of like, okay, let's see, do I want to make it my RPG so that people can, watch others? So it's not really multiplayer, but you can like use a code and watch somebody else play and maybe talk to them or something like that. How much does that cost? And I was like, I have no idea. I wonder if any of you have more experience with knowing how many numbers equal players equal whatever it might be.
I think my opinion can be summed up. I don't know if you go halfway down this thing, there's a link to the actual advertisement video thing they have. They have like the trailer video for this the new rollout. I don't know if you saw that.
The previous page.
Oh yeah.
One, so if you just click on that, so it goes to the actual YouTube page for it. I think my thoughts are pretty.
Just are you talking? I know what you're talking about. The reviews exactly. On that video, yeah. It was not a very well received video. I think it was
creating your game is
that one, right?
That's the one, yeah. And I think the comments pretty much sum it up quite nicely. I even left one there myself. I don't know if you'd find it, but yeah.
Yeah, so it was a lot of the comments here were primarily just about the video, and I think the lack of it really explaining what was in there. And it did take me, honestly, a little while to figure out what's actually in the gaming services stuff. So I had to kind of dig through. But I found that pricing page was probably the most helpful of them. Let me see if I was just
bandwagoning what Andrew was saying about it being not particularly clear as a product offering, right? Like they're very clearly they're taking cues from, as you mentioned, AWS and Azure, and taking all the wrong cues, if you ask me. So they're highlighting how we can synergize our economic, system design profile to help our whatever, and it's like, okay, but what are you doing? Like I watched that video and just thought, who is this for? Like, who do you think your audience is as a Unity user? And who do you think this is advertising to? Because it seems to me like you've completely missed the mark on who you're actually talking to as an audience. And that just really, I I wasn't in a good mood after watching that video, put it that way.
My understanding is economy equals like in-app purchasing. So my best guess, and this is just the way I'm reading it, I might be reading it really wrong, is that 10,000 writes means 10,000 people purchase something, so I write that data to something. And then when somebody wants to download or say, ooh, let me rebuy or check what I previously bought, that's a read. And so that costs 3 cents for every 10,000.
Yeah, this is one of the this kind of small rant here, but specifically, yes, you're right. What they're talking about here is data contracts for them, which is again one of my biggest pet peeves with this pricing model, where they're like, this is what it costs us, or more accurately, what it costs you to engage with our system, which is not how people think about systems like this. And so, what you're going to have to learn how to do, completely separate from their platform, is anybody who's ever used a cloud providing service, content delivery, whatever, you end up having to build your own caching layer. You're going to have to make queries to their website to get data about your game, and where possible, cache it locally so that your game is not making undue amounts of calls to their services because you're being hit for every one of those that you do. So you have to start writing your own architecture around avoiding their pricing systems because you want to cache things that you only need to get at the start of a play cycle separately from stuff that you have to do on a semi-regular basis. Like if you're doing a game economy thing, you might want to refresh the economy when the page loads, but not be doing regular calls unless you've got some sort of active ongoing thing. It's unnecessarily confusing, and there's ways they could have explained this better, I guess.
Yeah, I mean it's very much geared towards groups that have done this stuff before on other services, and like those other services. Say for instance AWS or something like that, as a game creator, unless you've done stuff in backend, then you look at those numbers and you're like, I don't know. And they've just copied the same format over to this, whereas now they're talking to a lot of indie game developers, and they're going to be like, well, I don't know what these bits are. I mean, caching is a standard practice for a lot of this stuff, because even with AWS you're going to get hit, and all you're doing is a lot of times you're just looking at the back of the cloud and going, what was the last time somebody wrote to this, and do I need to actually look at it? And that's the one call you make first before you start calling everything else out there to ask to get content, to get your economy stuff, to get your analytics, etc.
So I was just pulling up PlayFab's pricing model in comparison to get an idea, and after looking at theirs is way more confusing. Like, if you actually pull up the PlayFab pricing thing, I mean, they've got a lot more services listed in here, but they've got 3 different tiers of plans with different pricing in each tier. It's I don't know. The Unity one looks a lot less confusing after.
Well, yeah, but again,
after looking through this.
I'm trying to play devil's advocate here, and like I'm looking at this going, okay, compute hours. Yes, I know what compute hours are. I know that they're spinning up different boxes, different, you're paying for what usage you're going. And if you're at least with Azure, for example, they know that you have someone doing your DBA and your DevOps and all that stuff. There's somebody whose job that is, and they're going to tell you need to pick the right amount of ratios for spinning up the different boxes for doing your bulk processing at certain hours and then dialing it down so you're not paying for unnecessary machine usage or whatever. But I'm looking at this and I'm going, I don't even know. Are there different, are you going to choose your hardware? Like, are they going to have the classic thing that systems like this do is they let you pick your machine, or at least pick your configuration of your virtual image relative to what you're doing. And then how much of that are you supposed to have to know or do? If you're going to be charging me compute hours for different machines, what am I getting for my compute hours? And it's like, you're getting into this really annoying territory that, like, the benefit of their offerings should be that they provide a friendly face over the top of the architectural solutions that you could do yourself if you were willing to write your own services and put them on AWS, which realistically would be cheaper if you did that yourself. But I'm struggling to find what their benefit offering is if they're going to match other platforms and speak in the same languages and kind of have the same level of confusion. So yeah, I'm willing to give a bit of a break to it, but a lot of this just rubbed me up the wrong way the minute I saw this.
Yeah, the way it's displayed is off. The one thing I will give Unity is that they're getting it done, and they're probably following Epic a little bit in this. getting all these services in so it's in one house rather than having to go to AWS or Azure and set all that stuff up and learn different architecture, etc. It's nice. It's good. And I'm happy they're doing it. The multiplayer one that you've just rolled over, I mean, Unity multiplayer is a story unto itself. That's been fun. I've been on the beta for the Relay stuff and I haven't really digged into it yet. I was on the alpha and I hadn't dug into it yet, but don't tell Unity. So yeah, we'll see how it goes on as they move forwards. The one thing I do give Unity a bit of note for, some of the tutorials they put out for this stuff now are a lot better than it used to be. It used to be a case of they drop something and then you just be like, right, try to find out what this black box does by throwing everything at the wall. So hopefully as this stuff goes from beta to a little bit more solid, there'll be a more tutorial-based approach showing people what this stuff is and what it's going to affect. And some examples would be nice.
Yeah, I saw a couple of examples for the cloud code system, which seemed kind of interesting, setting up some basic authentication or keeping track of like the time, for simple time-based games, so you can't just hack the time. They had some scripts showing essentially how to do that, so you can't just change your local device time and skip ahead and stuff. And they had some cool stuff in there for the inventory things too, for adding things to people's inventory. I'm still not quite sure exactly how that ties in with economy versus the cloud save stuff. But it does seem pretty interesting. I don't know. I was kind of excited that they're, like you said, putting the whole thing together as one package that's really targeted around games. And my guess is that the majority of games that will use it at first will be things that are probably mobile games, right? The games that are already using services like PlayFab, that are already using these just remote services to save some data off, read some data back, or deal with just basic online gameplay stuff. And then hopefully it transitions into supporting a lot more. And with the network and the multiplayer stuff, I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Dave. Like, I've been, I used Unet when it came out, and then it died, and then I've been waiting for I don't know how many years for the replacement, and it's always coming soon. So hopefully,
yeah. See, that's the problem, right? Like I've used their analytics system, and honestly, it's pretty good. Does what it needs to. That's one of the things wrapped into this tier, and it works fine. Works for what I needed to. There's some issues I have with it, but nothing major. But I'm really not happy with the fact that they're using the beta tag like a badge of honor. Like a lot of this stuff is like they are way too I'm sorry, Unity, but you've really you've spoiled that premise for me that whenever they bring out a beta, that just means we want to get it out quick, and it's probably going to change right under your nose when you use it. And I can't look at that anymore and be like, oh look, there's a lot of fun new beta toys. All I see is look, here's a lot of radioactive stuff I can't touch for the next few months if I have any sanity that I want to maintain. So I don't know. I would have much preferred not this marketing push to have this super platform of all this stuff, because a lot of it is, quite frankly, if you're going to just slap beta on anything, it doesn't fill me any confidence. I would have rather seen, here's one system that we have bulletproofed and we'll move on to the next one, and here's our future plans. But this to me feels like very quickly wrapping up a half finished thing just to get it out as a nice single product offering. So
it's a tech industry proviso now. It's something that's across the board. Like back in the day, like I'm an old man.
All right, Grandpa Dave.
Just about 10 years ago, you would never put a beta into public. Beta is closed. And then open beta was a thing, but it was coming in. But now it seems like with whatever tech product, even hardware, you can pick up the beta hardware and pay for it and know that beta hardware is going to die in a year when the release comes out. And I don't know if it's the Kickstarter thing kind of brought that out into the industry. Oh, well, look, everybody's doing Kickstarters of these beta products and then putting them out there. But it's across the board of not just the gaming industry, just tech industry in general, that beta is now a thing that everybody can get in and play with. And yeah, Unity got tarnished a little bit with that beta flag with the networking stuff because they did. I mean, Unet was fun. Let's say fun to be nice. But analytics as a beta, I mean, analytics has been proven so many times. You don't beta out analytics, you just get it out. Some of the other stuff, if it was brand new in the industry, you'd let it go. But I don't know.
Yeah, I feel that way, especially with the UNet stuff, just because the biggest issue I had with the networking was that it was in beta and then it just never came. Right? It's still in beta and it's still like it's
Also,
a new version in beta, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like it probably just has never been high enough of a priority. And
Well,
given how important multiplayer games are, I feel like it probably should be higher. It's the one
yeah,
thing that
and
like if
that
somebody wants
whole
to make multiplayer, I tell them, Unreal is easier to start with if you have no experience anywhere and make a multiplayer game. It's still easier to get in Unreal. All right, sorry, Jason. What were you gonna say?
No, yeah, I just definitely I agree on all of that. Especially like if someone says to me I'm making a multiplayer game in Unity, it's like, well, don't. Just if you can get away with it, try not to. But no, I was gonna just double down on that the beta concept. That actually really infuriates me too, because I think it's been a completely co-opted concept where, like, aside from the actual purpose of semantic versioning and how each part is supposed to have a meaning, which a lot of people just throw random numbers together and they don't use it correctly. Separately from all of that, what really bothers me is that what is the point? Why is there such things as alphas and betas? Well, they're meant to represent having a proven test in an environment and then make changes relative to the feedback you're getting. But let's be real here. A public beta of something that Unity's producing is not going to be, let's get some fun feedback from the users. They're not going to go and start iterating their design on this system. They've already written the bloody pricing model. You know you're not changing the product offering if you've written the pricing model for the beta test you're doing for something that's public. It completely defeats the point of what's supposed to be a public beta. I just really don't like this whole conflating of these ideas. For games, makes sense. A public beta for a game is you getting feedback to change it, to see if the game loop is good, to iterate the process. But service providers in public beta, not a fan.
Sorry.
Yeah.
At least they fixed some of the typos on this page as well. There were some vast typos of the numbers when this page first came out.
I mean, ultimately, it's it's if someone will pay me to test something of mine, why not do it? That's all. That's why I like the even the game side of it, public beta versus a paid early access. People don't even think about the fact that they're different. Free public beta, I'm just plugging some time, but paid early access, I'm now having an expectation that they don't necessarily have to meet because it's early access. It seems like this is the same paradigm here. It's just a little bit worse, to Jason's point about the pricing model and stuff. We're not changing that unless you're going to make it more expensive. So yeah, it's all like, like your point about the Kickstarter thing. I think just seeing the game industry be so successful with stuff like early access, it just kind of perpetuates itself in other industries, and people just take advantage of the opportunity. And as long as people are doing it, why not?
Yeah. It's probably decent marketing too.
I'd prefer to have access to them. Like I'd rather have the betas be accessible and open than have them be locked and you have to know somebody to get into them. It may just be a marketing thing. Like just say, hey, we're testing this out. Go try these things.
Well, this is the other thing too.
And then get out of beta eventually.
Like I'm not saying betas are bad, and as someone who I think you can attest to as a fellow VR dev, is companies like Valve used to be absolutely awesome for alphas and betas. They would just give you code and they'd iterate the code really fast, and you'd be able to play with it and learn stuff and be ready for launches of things. But I look at this stuff and I just like, who's it for? Like, this beta launch isn't for the devs working on project whether they're going to integrate stuff. Let's be real here, that it was a marketing push to compete with Unreal. It's literally just beat for beat, let's match them really quickly and get a competing product out with all of the same buttons. So it's very hard for me to take that seriously as it's open so we get to work on it and play with it and whatever. It felt very much like, I guess the reason this bothers me so much is I've been through this exact cycle before, when Facebook took over Oculus and told us, no, it's fine. It's just new toys. It's all good. You'll totally, and you'll never ever, we promise, like line in the sand, you'll never need a Facebook account to log into a VR headset. That's our promise to you. Let's see how that plays out. And so, like, I just, as soon as I start seeing the language shift to go from talking about devs to talking about over the dev's head to sell it to the marketing, the purchaser at a company is who that's for. It's not for us. That's when I start to get worried, because it's jumped over the devs at this stage. Yeah, I don't know. Just it bothers me. I think that's pretty clear, and I think this should also say to anyone who's said before, I'm not a Unity apologist here. I'll fight when things make sense, and Unity's a lot of great features. Sometimes they get stuff wrong, and I think they got stuff wrong here.
So, why do you guys? Why is Unity even looking to compete with Unreal at this point? I mean, aren't they? They're distinctly different. They're used for their very different reasons. It seems weird that they would, treat themselves like a David and Goliath when they're just kind of parallel, ultimately in their use cases. It just seems odd that they would do something like this to compete with Unreal, when a lot of people just kind of think of them differently. If you guys understand what I'm saying, like, why do you think that they're trying so
really
hard
trying to compete with Unreal's services directly. I think it's more competing with multiplay and PlayFab, and then Unreal and Unity are both kind of jumping in against that. Right, they're trying to take over that services market, because then you get the benefit is if you end up being the provider, they're just like Amazon. The reason that Amazon stock is so fucking insane.
Yeah.
If you end up being that provider there for the game, any game that gets big is suddenly, you're getting a chunk of that, and you're getting it in perpetuity. Like, until that game is completely dead, you're still getting a chunk of that. So it makes sense as a long-term service provider if they can make it really easy to integrate into the games. So if you can just have some APIs in there where instead of having to go pull in libraries and write a bunch of stuff to transform data, you just make a little call and it saves off your data as JSON and it pulls it right back in as a class, and you don't really have to write any code. It has the selling point of being fast and easy to integrate right into your Unity project versus
but do you think that
the alternatives. And if they can match the pricing, then I could see the argument there. If it's the same price but easier to integrate, then why wouldn't you use it?
And do you think that they're genuinely, like, really thinking about the end user here, or they're more thinking about their business model?
Both.
Yeah, I would say it's got to be both, because they've got to beat. I mean, they have to be on par with the competition, but easier to integrate to win. I mean, if they do that, they could definitely win. If they don't do that and they're way out of range on the price, or they're not a lot easier to integrate, or they just don't support all this stuff, then they won't be able to do it. But I think if they can, because they've got the engine part there automatically, they've got a big advantage. Same with Epic, though. I think Epic's probably doing the same thing, because they see that as another opportunity, since they only charge, what is it, like 15% on their sales instead of 30. It's like another back end opportunity where they can start to make some serious revenue off the bigger games.
And it's good that they're doing. I mean, for a small indie developer, if you have to go to all the different servers, you have to go to AWS, you have to pick another provider for this, you have to pick a provider for your multiplayer, you have to pick up. You're getting all these different third-party companies having to provide all those things. You're having to support all those APIs and having to do all those connections and go through. I'm really happy Unity's doing this. Language, okay, but I'm really happy they're bringing all this stuff in-house. So it's a good option for a very small dev just to come in and have all this available. And if it's integrated really tightly, and caveat, I haven't integrated the stuff myself, so I don't know how good it is at integration, how easy it is. But if it's really easy just to switch this stuff on and use it, it's a bonus for small indie houses.
Yeah, I haven't played with it in depth myself. I just went through the examples, and the sample code at the very least looks like it's not very difficult. I assume once you get through the setup process, looks like it's relatively easy to save and load any player specific data or authenticate a player, which I thought was another cool thing. It's one of the things that other services have too, is just getting a player account where you don't have to manage their accounts, which I always recommend. If you're dealing with players' accounts or user accounts and you are saving their passwords and dealing with all that crap, you probably shouldn't be. Just try to avoid it and try to offload that to some other service, so you're not responsible for it when something goes terribly wrong.
That's the key thing for me is coming from a solo developer mindset where I want to make a game, I want it to be a multiplayer game. I don't think it's ever going to be like giant, but I also don't want to suddenly find myself spending more than I'm making because all these people are playing it, but they're not paying anymore or whatever. It's very difficult to pricing, figure out what does this mean when it says 16 cents per concurrent user. Does that mean $1.60 if 10 more people above the limit come on to play? So I have to cap it because I'm too scared of losing money. Does it mean that, oh, if my in-app purchase flow doesn't really work and people aren't buying, then I'm just going to be screwed because nobody's buying nor to pay the cost of playing? And then the implementation of it. As a single solo hobbyist developer, many of us who might still be learning how to code, it could be very daunting to say the least. And I'm hopeful, Jason, that what you're hinting at, that the code is easy to use, so that people who are more new to the game can kind of look at it and be like, okay, that's not difficult to understand. I just do a few things, it kind of magically works in the back end, and okay, I can move on and focus on the game rather than focus on making all these other things work.
I mean, I appreciate the optimism, but like, how much of Unity stuff just works so far? Let's be real here. Let's talk about input system, rendering pipelines. How much of it just works, and how much of it is an absolute nightmare? It's great when when you get it working, but none of it just works. And we're talking about a rollout of a stack of stuff, all in beta, and it's all going to work together nicely and just turn on perfectly when we need it to. I'm skeptical. I'll put it that way.
So how do you guys solve Andrew's problem, right? He's a solo developer. He sees this thing here. He thinks it might be good for his game. How does he go about like properly investigating this, curating it, and figuring out what he needs from it? And then on top of that, like actually implement it. Like, what would you guys what advice would you give him?
Well, that's one place where the free tiers come in. You test heavily under the free tiers, work out exactly what your concurrent users would cost you, what all the data you're up and down is going to cost you within that free tier, because it will give you all the details about, you sent this up, you sent that back, you sent this up, you done this, and you'll get a full list of what you've done. And then you work out, well, my average player, if they're on for an hour, they're going to be doing this and they're going to cost me this. And you can basically start working out what your price will cost you by just hitting those free tiers. And one of the things to look at is, should I be sending up groups of this? Like, should I be bunching stuff together and send it up as one call rather than sending multiple little ones up and things like that? You'll be able to test that out in the free version. So that's why all these services have these free levels. So you can do all that testing. You can get to know exactly what your users will cost you. And a lot of times you can work it back into, now I know what the price of my game is going to be, or whether I'm going to have this as a service that people buy on top of the game as a subscription or things like that. You can work that stuff out once you've done the free tier.
You just for all messages as a microtransaction, Andrew. Sell your network messages.
Well, I'm thinking I'm sitting here thinking, okay, there's opportunity for assets now to make all of that, the batching of messages together, to make that kind of automated, so that I, as a developer, can just say save all this data, and then some asset would be like, okay, I'm going to do this smartly for you, so you can just push as much data as you want to me. I will then make it go to the network appropriately to save you money, and I, as a developer, can just do whatever the hell I want, and somebody else's code is magically going to make it better for me.
I will say, to be fair, despite all my misgivings, regardless of which platform you pick, whether it is rolling your own AWS stuff or whatever, in general, the way these things tend to work is an economy of scale over time as your game grows. Normally, in your position, I wouldn't worry about, I don't know if I'm going to accidentally, to politely put it, screw myself by overcharging and doing all that, because what tends to happen is you shouldn't jump to a higher tier at the start anyway, because you don't have the user need for it. You shouldn't be paying for that much. So you should start in the free tier. And then when stuff starts to bottleneck, you'll know pretty quickly, because the benefit of using an entire cloud architectured system is there tends to be analytics out the wazoo. You'll be able to see exactly network traffic. And what a lot of people don't think about is this stuff is more than just traffic in, traffic out. There are locations in the world which have, different servers that are set up with cached versions of things you need, and you have to partition based on your user base, whether it's in certain country. There's a whole lot of, this gets bigger. This gets a lot bigger, and a lot of it's done for you, and a lot of it's done scaled in such a way that there's alerts and events. So someone in your position should be able to just press the default, and I'm hoping they do have at least a get started, don't worry, we'll just figure it out. And before anything ever gets too crazy, you'll either get alerts to say you're bottlenecking here, or you don't have enough units for this. So that's never been a problem for me from my experience, except for the odd case where you've left a machine on high process mode overnight and come back and they charge you 300 because you were doing bulk process. Sometimes that happens. I'm not going to lie, that does happen. But you have to already know what you're doing to get yourself in trouble to the point where you're overcharging yourself. The average person, I would say, you can start your game on effectively low settings and just grow it as requirements hit. So that wouldn't worry me. It's more the confusing nature of it and the reliability of it that I'm more worried about. I think in terms of actually using it, I think they're going to do a good enough job of being beginner friendly with the tiers and things. I just don't like the language and the promises that are being made by that language when that's not proven yet. Like I don't think it's I don't think it's like, what's our uptime like? We haven't even talked about where's the values on that. Do we even you have to earn the proof of saying our uptime is X% on this kind of thing, and yeah, I don't know, whole big separate topic. You're fine, I'd say. You'd be fine.
So on the opportunities part, Andrew, are you thinking about putting this into your like your inventory system? So you could have like a remote inventory system add-on that people could get that saves off their inventory remotely for players?
Well, I like the idea of cloud saving the data so that you can go to another machine and load your data, or if the game ever becomes mobile, then you can just go back and forth between platforms and you're playing the same game, or you can pass your game to a friend and they can just start playing it for you and just have fun with it. I also like the idea. Now, my game's not going to be an MMO. I know that, but there could be an interesting thing if there was like a mini game inside. You go to an inn, and then all of a sudden you can like play a card game with other people who are in that inn, right? So you're all playing your own game, but you're in the inn, and so it's like, I don't know what you call the MMO light or whatever, but it's just an area where you can go and now you can play against real people this mini game just to take a break from the main game, or even let people, come into your game so they could like be a ghost and watch you play on their own machine. And in that, maybe they can like do different things. They can look around differently than you can. They can click around, see what the enemies are, and maybe see things before you. I'm sure people can cheat. I don't care about that because it's just a single player game, but it could be really fun for viewers to watch a streamer play and then log in, play that, watch that game and see different things going on, see all the stats, see, just a lot of different information about the playthrough that you wouldn't see if you were actually playing.
Yeah, that sounds fun. It seems like it'd be pretty fun and cool to put that all in and just have it like, I don't know. I like it as a package too. so everybody can do it in there too.
Yeah, but that's why I think with asset store stuff is a problem solution thing. So the fewer problems there are, the fewer assets there can be. But every time a new thing like this comes out, it's going to create some problems. So that means there's solutions out there ready to be made. So if anyone has a solution, now's the time to start working on it.
Yeah, I think this new tech is always a good opportunity just to put out something new. I remember when UNet was relatively new, I decided somebody recommended building a multiplayer kit for it, just building a simple multiplayer game for VR for it. Like, okay, why not? Because somebody had asked for it, and then somebody else recommended it. It was actually at one of the meetups I was at with Dave. It was Curtis recommended it. I built that thing up, and it was super successful. Like I put it up, and it was instantly getting sales right away. A simple little multiplayer kit that took me like a week to build and a couple days to document up, and it's really good. I think that there's a lot of opportunity with this new stuff to do something similar. So anybody watching and looking at making packs, this might be the time to do it. Or at least something to consider building something for. Welcome back, Jason.
Sorry, I just needed to visit the voice room.
So, do you guys have anything else you want to talk about with this services stuff, or would you like to jump on to something else?
For me, it's a wait and see. I'll give some of this stuff a test and start playing with it, and then once I've done that, I'll know a little bit more about it and be able to dig in more.
Yeah, I think that's a fairly safe bet. I can dislike the rollout, and I don't like the direction from past experience, but I will say, I'll wait and see. Like I'm a big fan of letting the tech grow and change, and we'll see what happens. I just think realistically, a lot of people aren't going to use this early. Like we're talking about unproven stuff, like you're not going to start a game right now and just lean on all this hardware, all this new technology, because like you can't rely on everything being the same or working the way you expect it to now. So I'm just struggling to find who that market is right now, because you launch with a super over engineered Facebook-esque introductory motion graphic video introduction and all of this pricing models and stuff, and I'm trying to figure out who that's for right now. Is it indies? I don't think so. Is it people who have a game in production they're about to launch? Well, it's a bit late, right? You're not going to be jumping onto it at this stage. So I'm just a little bit curious who the intended audience right now for the service they just dropped is, and I can't see it. So I'll wait until it's proven.
If you are doing this stuff, then I would say, and it's probably been mentioned on this channel plenty of times, one layer of abstraction in your code and stuff like that from any service you do. So if you're doing analytics, pass the analytics to your class that manages that, and then have the service on the side of that. So you don't have to go in and find every place you put that analytics marker and change it because the service has changed. One layer of abstraction from any service to an external provider that you do. That's my biggest recommendation for that stuff.
Perfect example of this is the Unity Analytics I'm using for one client project at the moment, literally to capture analytics. But we're also capturing biometric data and personal stuff, and there's legal things there you have to consider when taking data from people. And so we have to actually put in a partitioning layer to see what do we do with certain data based on regulations and things. So if we just had a direct send to Unity Analytics, Unity actually have their own rules about what can and can't be used and what you have to surface information to people. So even just putting that layer in means that when we came back to it and went, okay, we now before we have users use this, we have to make sure we're legally abiding by everything you need to. Having that layer gives you that freedom. So as a general rule, no matter what service you're using, whether it's something as simple as high scores or something like analytics, you want a nice boundary line that you say send data to your thing and it goes to a implementation of your thing.
Abstract it all the way.
Sense to me. But yeah.
Yeah, for me, I think I'm gonna play with this code thing for a minute and see what I can do with it, just to try to experiment. And I want to play a little bit with the economy and inventory thing, just to get a better understanding of what they are and what their kind of plan is with those. I think the code thing could be really interesting. There have been a lot of cases where I've thought about making a little game that required something using a Lambda, but I didn't really want to dive into setting up Lambdas and the newest version of it because it's constantly updating and stuff. So I might play with that a little bit. I do wish that had a C# backend option too. I assume one day it will. Right now it's just JavaScript, and it's not that difficult, but I still prefer C# over JavaScript if it's an option. But I'm just kind of looking forward to seeing what it encompasses, like what stuff is actually in there and how easy it is to actually integrate. My hope is that like it's at the point where I can just hop in, write a single line of code, and it does what I want it to do. And going through the cloud code stuff, you can see that they've got it is in that beta state, so you can see they've got some basic options, and then it like this coming soon of pre-built things that will be like the more common tasks, it looks like. So I'm excited to see what those are too.
One of my favorite things they do have in that is, and it's been available as part of the analytics for a while, is cloud configuration, which is really powerful because it lets you have settings that you can basically A/B test your audience. And that sounds really weird, but it's kind of cool that you can have something where a boss health or how long waves last in a game or something. And what you can do is you could effectively say, for this region or this time zone or something, you can set a configuration rule and say they get a different value. So bosses have half the health or something, and you can just A/B test and see then if you put your analytics in place correctly, you can see how long it takes people to complete paths and routes, whether they actually drop off at certain times and how much retention you have. And you can use that as a very quick way to go, let's see if increasing ammo per clip actively changes the flow of the game and how long people are retaining for. There's a lot of really cool stuff there, and it's just, so I'm not going to say it's all terrible. It's just, like I said, just cautious, but that's really cool, and there's a lot of real value to be able to A/B test like game flow in a way that you just can't do easily otherwise,
Yeah, if you're making freemium games, you need to be A/B testing so heavily to make sure the in-app purchases are coming out well.
Yeah, I played with the cloud configuration stuff in the past and used it in a couple games. The very basic first version of it, and it was handy even back then without the A/B testing. With it, it's just great. You can see what works, what doesn't. So, I guess if we're done with service talk for a little while, there was one other thing that's on my mind that's coming up that nobody else probably cares about, but I do. Yes, just the one finger. And that's no, not two, just one other thing, Slay. And that one thing was that Age of Empires 4 is coming out, comes out this week. So if anybody wants to play, hit me up. Playing some Age of Empires 4 on Steam whenever. I think it's on the 28th. I actually played it. I played through the test that they had, and it was great. It was by far the best new RTS I've played in a very, very long time. It reminded me of playing old RTSs, but without all of the feeling and looking like an old RTS with crappy inputs and terrible graphics. So it looked fun. I was curious though if you guys have been looking forward to or playing anything new though.
I just been playing Dorf Romantic. I'm going to get the name right. But it's a really chill game where you lay tiles out and you have to build this like little town with windmills and stuff like that. I wanted to find a game that was really relaxing. And it's the one game I found that I can actually sit there and just lay tiles. It's got beautiful, relaxing music going on in the background, and little birds flying over your tiles as you're playing, and all this. You lay your little rivers and train tracks. It's really relaxing, and it's wonderful. I've been well into that recently.
I actually grabbed that right after. I remember we were talking privately, and you mentioned it. I grabbed it, installed it, started playing it. A kid walked in, and I forgot the game existed. So I'm glad you mentioned it again. I'm going to give it another try later on today.
Yeah, I'm playing too many things right now. I can't. I saw Age of Empires. I'm like, man, come on! It's Christmas season's happening. All these games are coming out. I'm playing so many games. It's insane. But I do want to dig into it. Just as an old age fan, I'd love to play with somebody. But man, it's seriously like my game. I think Friday I played like 3 or 4 different games over multiple sessions and doing stuff on top of, obviously this is all after work. There's just too much stuff coming out. And this time of the year, I just go nuts. I'm buying everything, checking out its free stuff.
Anything that you'd recommend people definitely play?
Oh, I mean, if you're a Metroid fan, you definitely play Dread. If you're a Left 4 Dead fan, play Back 4 Blood. Back 4 Blood is actually surprisingly fantastic. I really love the way that they translate the kind of gamble of bonuses to bad stuff system, and I love the little deck system. But also like I just picked up the digital Gloomhaven last night. It's playing with my wife, and I'm a Gloomhaven fan. So playing it digitally, translation was really good. So yeah, I'm just all over the place right now. Also, I'm still playing some Destiny 2, and yeah, man, too many games coming out. And the new Mario Party comes out next Sunday, I think. So I'm just like, it's just all over the place. But and then of course, there's another game on the list. What was it called again? It's what's the game you guys were just talking about?
Oh, the one David
was.
What's it called?
Are you talking about Age of Empires or Dorf Romantic?
No, the
romance.
The chill game.
Dorf Romantic.
Okay.
Jason, put a link up for it. I can't find it. I'll find it for you.
Yeah, we'll drop a link in chat for everybody.
They're probably abusing the name something rotten.
And of course, I got to play Deathloop according to Jason.
I'm genuinely curious, just purely from the perspective of level design. I'd love to go on like you and I'd have an hour-long conversation exclusively about level design, because I genuinely think more than most other studios, Arcane just understand level design.
Yeah.
And there's a lot in there. And this is a weird way to phrase it, but I don't think the game will do well, and I don't think it's a good thing for Arcane, and I think the studio's in danger, and I think it's really sad that's true. And I'm very curious if we can kind of get to some idea as to why a game with objectively pretty good combat, a pretty good premise, really good art, and a really good level design, and even myself, I played it and went, eh. But like I can see it mechanically and feature wise, like I could like it's a masterclass in so many ways, but it's also just not very compelling. And I'd love to have a discussion on that topic because it's fascinating.
Oh, sure, yeah, I'll have to pick it up. I have a friend who's like a huge Arcane fan, and he fell off of it pretty quick, surprisingly fast. So that kind of put me off on getting it right away. But then your recommendation, I'm like, all right, I got to get this in the pipe. So I'll probably try to pick it up maybe over Thanksgiving or something like that and play it during when I got time to just play games all day.
So I wanted to pop up a real quick question, and sorry to bombard you with this, Andrew, but this looks exactly like what I remember seeing you building. So I just wanted to point it out. And the question says, I'm struggling with an inventory system that can store multiple slot items like a grid type, and they made something using NGUI, but want to use drag an image for each element in the inspector. So they're trying to build essentially an inventory system where you move things around in a bag, and then it's taking up different spaces, and you have to fit them into the different slots, right? So it's
Diablo style.
Yeah.
No,
exactly.
I wasn't sure whether they meant the inventory system that I'm built and using, or because a slot item in my mind is like, oh, here's your helmet, drag it there. Now you have a helmet, and it's like you have an icon per. So I wasn't sure about that
When
question.
they say, I think saying multiple slot items, they mean the Diablo style system.
Where the item covers multiple slots.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking, not of it going
like
into
4 slots and a dagger is 1 slot, stuff like that.
Okay,
That's how I read it.
So, I mean, for the system I built, I didn't use NGUI. I'm still surprised NGUI is still around, but I guess it was so good that people still use it. But it's not easy. For my stuff, I mix 3D and 2D, and just put the 3D object in front of the 2D stuff and use a special camera and whatnot. And there's a lot of different things going along with it. It's not the easiest thing, but it's fun when it works.
Is it something that you've streamed where they could actually kind of go through and get a view of some of that code and see how you've set it up?
Maybe a long time ago. I can't remember if I streamed.
I remember you were doing the close in one of the streams where you had the drag and drop out shirts and stuff with your block test version. So there is some of that out there.
Yeah, and I'm currently redoing my modules from the ground up, and part of that is going to be the inventory system. So sometime, hopefully soon, I'll be redoing that. It won't take much to redo, but there will be a bit where I go through the code and just look at it all. And then once that's done, I do plan on going into a deep dive of each component of the module system and to explain how it works. You could easily copy it if you wanted to. I don't care about that, but you could also just buy it for $30 too. But hopefully that would give people an idea of how they might want to roll their own, because I'm sure there's a lot of ways to build a similar system with NGUI or with another, whatever it might be for your project.
If I could give one bit of advice designing something like this, it's a common mistake where people get very confused trying to solve too many problems at once. Like if you're thinking about dragging items into an inventory, you're thinking about spaces that are physical with shapes and using drag and drop and point and click. But if you take a step back and realize from a data perspective, it is boxes of numbers with stuff with different sizes, and some of the numbers might represent how many slots a thing takes up or a shape of it or something. You can solve these problems numerically. Like you can literally have a thing called an inventory and give it a gun, which is a 1-1-1 different in a grid layout, and hand it that and see what it does. And you can resolve all of these complicated issues as a code thing, and then slap a face on top of it. And that's kind of a good way to separate the two, because yes, there's handling the dragging and dropping and drawing the objects, but realistically, I think Andrew will attest to this, I pointer enter, I pointer exit, and the drag, like it's like 5 lines of code to make a thing click and drag with the mouse. that's not where the problem is. The problem is resolving the complexities of space and array sizes and avoiding issues. And honestly, you'll have a harder time trying to debug that live by having to keep redragging new things in an inventory, rather than saying, if inventory size is 10 and I try to put a thing into it and it's at 8, it should not let me. It should then fire an event that says can't take, and then maybe the game result of that is spawn item and drop on floor or whatever, but that's irrelevant to the like solving the problem. And so you'll have an easier time if you solve the problem and forget about the fact that it's drawn with X UI, with X system, stored this way or whatever. Just do the math bit and figure it out.
To restate that, if I can, just to make sure I'm understanding it correctly, you're basically saying, okay, ignore the user side of it. Just you've got your player bucket, you've got your other bucket, whatever it might be that you're passing items to, just data between these buckets. As long as the data can pass between, you can put up just buttons saying, give me a sword. Boom, put it in there. It works. Push that button a ton until you can't fit any more swords, and make sure it says can't fit any more swords. And then do the code of saying, okay, I've got my from bucket, my to bucket. Can I pick up a sword? And now it's in this intermediate bucket, which is your on-screen UX. You don't have that yet, but it exists there. It lives there. What you're going to do with it, you'll figure that out later. As long as you get all those connections working, that middle part becomes a lot easier. And I would attest to that, because that's all it is with my system, it's essentially you've got a player bucket, you've got another bucket. You don't show that. You could show them both at the same time, I suppose, but you've got the two. And then in the middle there is your I'm holding this item bucket, which is outside of the two. So if you close those two down, neither of them have this sword anymore because you have it in this middle layer. And then you choose what to do with it. Put it here, put it there. Can you? If you can't, don't do anything. Or drop it into the world, which means just disappear it from this and now put it into the world, this fourth area, and then spit it out in front of the player so they can see it in the world. That's essentially what it is. You just got different buckets and you're passing the thing between the buckets.
It's a separation of logic layer to presentation layer. And then on your logic layer, have loads of testing code around that. And you can do it in the editor, like inspector. Like every time I write something like that, I have a little inspector set out that I can just basically add test items to and take test items away from, and just all these buttons down on the editor. Before I even get around to the presentation of putting it in and dragging and dropping all the rest of it, just can I stick this in? Can I pull this out? Just with all these buttons down in your inspector.
And I did a really
abstract what you were saying, Jason. It seems like you were also trying to point out that you have this huge thing and you need to break it down to components, and component is basically one unit equals one block. And now what happens when I make it 2 blocks and things like that? But just tackling it one little piece at a time and then just building on that seemed like one of the core points you're trying to get across, which we talk about stuff all the time. People just take inventory as one big thing, for example, and they just try to solve all these problems at once because they're just thinking about the end product, when really you just need to break it down to unit 1. How does unit 1 work? How does unit 1 interact with this other unit? And then just build from there, which it's a much easier process because you're testing less and less complex things when you break it down little pieces.
Yeah, and there's so many examples of this that until you start going into the depths of some of these things, it can be hard to see. Like AI sounds like a big like if we brought up Age of Empires or whatever earlier. It's like the pathfinding on that is predominantly a 2D grid. You don't see it. That's not the way you see the game. But somewhere, in code, there's a bunch of boxes, and the boxes represent places that are safe to stand or not safe to stand, and then things move along these kind of 2D grids that resolve spaces. And so you can think about things, it's solving simple problems and stacking them. If you want to see a really over-the-top example of this, somewhere a while ago on Charles's channel, I did like a 3-hour explanation of an example of a vending machine, and I demonstrated how I built a console application where I sold coffee, purely like typing in the console. Unity's not even open, not even a thing we're doing. And I took that code, I dropped it into Unity, and I made a vending machine that sold weapons and things. And it had a little 3D UI and custom icons, and you could pick stuff. And it had all the validation for you don't have enough money in your wallet, you're not the right class type, all of the stuff you need. And all of that code lived in a DLL that I could drop into any engine that supports C# and even just make a desktop app out of it. Because the part that you see from the the Borderlands style vending machine, if you think about it, other than like spinning models and various stuff that's Unity specific. The rest is you have wallet has money, shop has things have cost, if amount in wallet. Like all of this can be reasonably talked about and thought about and tested in vivid detail without ever even touching Unity. I'm not suggesting everyone do that. It takes a lot. Like separating it that far is quite a lot, but just reasoning out the fact that checking that a wallet can or cannot receive amounts of money, or that shops can or cannot receive items, is so much easier than trying to solve the problem of the spinning 3D model that can be placed, because that's irrelevant. That's a separate thing from the problem you're actually solving.
I picked the perfect time to start eating milk dud, right? So I think I might do a video on this, just on how to do it like a Diablo style inventory system, a non-opinionated small version of it, to just show how you could kind of put that into any game. So if people are interested in that, let me know in chat and just hit the thumbs up button, and maybe I'll do that sometime this week. I think it would be fun, interesting, and we could talk a lot about the separation, essentially storing all of that data into a 2D grid or a 2D array of item data or numbers or whatever it ends up being. All right, the milk dud's gone. So what other topics you guys want to talk about today? I brought forward, I think that was kind of all the stuff I wanted to hit. Are there any
talk about milk duds?
I mean, we could talk about milk duds. They're like the one thing that keeps me from keeping the weight off. These damn milk duds. I got my 0-calorie drink and then my 500-calorie box of milk duds that needs to get out of here.
And that's your meal for the day. Gotcha.
Yeah. Yep. Calcium.
All right.
Just having sat with you for a weekend way back and watch you drink all those energy drinks. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Now it's only 0-calorie ones. Made a huge difference for the weight. And that's how I lost all my weight. But yeah, my desk is consistently littered with cans. So go through a couple of days.
I'm on basically water and sushi, so I'm in the same boat of trying to be a good boy.
Wow.
And I don't know if I showed you before, Dave. That's my fridge full of it's full of rock stars in there.
I hope all you people are getting sponsored by these cans.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
I need a rock star sponsorship. That would.
I'm on apples and carrots.
I don't think apples and carrots sponsor.
Oh.
Okay. I'm on bubbly water and small tomatoes.
Sorry.
And nuts.
I'm an Englishman, so I live on tea.
That's fine. That's fine.
Oh, as a random note, I tried that bubble tea for the first time in my life, like last week. Don't get it.
Sorry.
Just no interest. Give me coffee. Just good old fashioned coffee. Not a fan of this. Why does my tea look like some sort of soft drink with little bubble? I hate it. It was annoying, confusing, and I felt old drinking it.
It's expensive too. Boba drinks.
And it was just too many options. It was one of those like I went to get it, and there's like you pick one of 30 different. There's flavors. There's like various different things they put in it. I'm like, I don't like. I never thought I'd be that guy. Like you hear the old cliche about give me a plain black coffee. It's like no. I'm still asking for a hazelnut flat white with like I still have my checklist of options, but it still feels less complicated than this like Frankenstein tea thing.
So here, let's hit one of the questions that's popping up in chat. Aaron had a question about Unreal Experience, and I'm kind of curious what you guys' thoughts were on it. He said, I see a lot of job postings list Unreal Experience as a requirement. As a Unity dev, how far should I dive into Unreal to make my skill set more valuable? And it's been a while since I dove into Unreal, so I'm curious what you guys think and where your Unreal
I'd say at least far enough to understand what the differences are and why one is good for one thing versus another. If you are not genuinely interested in working in Unreal, but just want to like stay abreast of what makes Unreal different or cool. I mean, if you're looking at job postings for specifically Unreal Experience, and obviously you want to get a little deeper, but I would at least understand that much if you want to remain in Unity as your primary development API.
That said, sometimes I've seen job listings that are for one engine and they will list other engines as like alternatives in case you don't have experience with it. So there'll be like a Unity job that's hiring. They want Unity experience, but they'll take Unreal or Lumberyard experience, or
Yeah.
they're the inverse, or maybe they're using a custom engine and they just want any experience with any engine. In that case, I wouldn't worry too much about it if the primary job is with Unity.
Yeah, I think the big thing there is that C++ versus C# as far as interacting with Unreal. I mean, obviously the languages are similar, but there's just vast differences in what you need when you're trying to do certain things within each one. At least understanding that is probably the key thing. I mean, getting over the interfaces and how the different engines do stuff, you can probably learn pretty quickly if you're just good at one of them. But understand just the kind of baseline way that you interact with them from a coding standpoint is the thing I think would probably be most important. Of course, knowing the difference between C# and C++ is just beneficial overall, outside of the comparison Unity and Unreal.
What percentage would you say, guess probably, of studios are working in just one engine and will very unlikely to use a different one?
It depends on what you mean by one engine. Are you saying proprietary engine or just Unity and Unreal?
Joe, that they're just saying, oh, well, we only make games in Unity or we only make games in Unreal. There's like little chance we'll ever switch engines for another project.
I don't know. I think a lot of studios, once they know if it's proprietary engine, then they try to stick with it as much as possible. But recently, a lot of studios that have been hardcore proprietary engine or growth of in-house engines like Square, they have now seen the shiny of Unreal and how easy it is, because once you go to a more public engine, the talent pool is huge. But I think that if you're already working in Unreal, if you're going to make a game using Unity, it's probably because it was a side project from someone in-house who just wanted to make something cool, and Unity was just an easy way for them to do it. But I think most studios, once they got something, especially Unreal, once you're on that wagon or on Unity, you got a support structure. The next iteration of the engine comes out, you can just integrate with it easy. You kind of hit the ground running. You can just move forward pretty quickly. So unless there's like some big reason to pivot, I think that most studios, I'd say a high percentage, probably 80%, would just stick with the one engine. An in-house engine obviously is very different. If you're as long as you're not losing your engineers or anything like that, and like you are actively investing in your technology and moving it forward, you end up in a situation where you can just do things that Unreal or Unity can't do. If your infrastructure is solid enough, then maybe you can kind of push your game, your specific game or types of games you make farther than Unreal and Unity may have, because they're just kind of vanilla engines that are trying to do a lot of things. But like, for instance, Unreal and Unity can't natively make an MMO. You have to build a bunch of infrastructure and things like that. So, a lot of MMO houses, I guess it's becoming less so nowadays, but a lot of MMO houses have just proprietary engines that are built to support the fact that they are making these games with massive amounts of players and things like that. I mean, New World is Lumberyard, right? But I think that was built to support an MMO style thing. But yeah, I'd say once you get on the bandwagon of an engine, as long as the engine is supported well, whether internally or externally, there's really no reason to change, unless just you come with some crazy idea that is either super easy to make in this other engine and cheaper.
That was Hearthstone, right?
What's that?
Like Hearthstone.
Yeah.
They wanted to make a card game, and they were using I mean, at Blizzard, they use their own custom engine for everything. So they were using that, and then they wanted to make a card game. They switched to Unity because it worked for going out to mobile and PC and everything easily, and just kind of, and they were able to hire people for it, right? So
a small dev team too, I think. Like they wanted to have it be a smaller team.
Yeah. And like seeing what Aaron said about, he had Unreal experience, got tons of interviews. After a good technical interview, I got a job offer on the spot. Like, I think that, to the point about, requiring Unreal experience. I mean, if you go and interview well, which again, we talk about this a lot. If you go and interview well, you sound like an expert, or you sound like you can learn or pick up on things because you understand just basic concepts of whatever the thing you're interviewing for. I mean, if the interview's well and you sound like a good expert, I think a lot of studios will at least consider you regardless of the requirements, unless it's like really, really important that you know this thing right here because we're hiring you for this very specific thing that we need to get done quickly. Which if a studio is in that spot, then something bad happened, like someone just left or they just didn't plan very well. So I think generally, if you just are good at whatever it is that you're interviewing for, you still got a good shot.
Yeah, I'm thinking of my first Unreal job. I had no Unreal experience working at Sony. Yeah, it was my first exposure to actually working in real Unreal with the code. I mean,
2.5.
You can even get to that stuff before.
And we gutted that engine like crazy. Oh man.
Yeah, that's the same for anything, right? Like I got my first time learning JavaScript was on a C# job I was hired for, and the requirements changed in the job, right? So it's nothing I didn't have any control over that. I think though a line has to be drawn between the question in terms of, because it's easy to answer it from the perspective of a game studio. Why would a game studio have one engine or the other, and why we should pick it? But if we're being honest, the question is more about, should I learn X, Y, or Z? And the truth is almost always yes, you should, because forget about the studio in particular or what they're doing. The truth is, it's very easy to fall into an accidental sort of bandwagon to what you're doing. The first language you pick will be your favorite for a long time because it's the thing you feel most at home with until something else might supplant it later. And it's very easy to pick whatever your first engine is that you start getting good at, and you'll start like finding yourself arguing in forums about it despite not actually having ever used the other engine that you're saying you're saying is worse for reasons. So don't fall into the marketing and the fun hype of console wars, because we're not talking about a fun hobby anymore. We're talking about your career. And if you're talking about your career, be honest with yourself and say, I don't know which engine I'm going to use, and I don't know whether my opinion doesn't really matter at this stage. So try them both, try to make something in it, learn them. And the harsh truth is, what's going to end up realistically happening is the most senior developer will pick their favorite engine, usually, because whoever's paying the bills are going to go with the decision of the person that they trust the most to be the technical leader on the project. And so realistically, and this goes for all software, the tools being used will be the favorite tools of the person who's most senior in the development role of that job. And so you might find yourself flip-flopping and having no control over it. And I would say it's just a good idea to have firm footing in both engines. You might find yourself thrown into an engine you didn't plan on working on, and at least if you made a hobby project over a weekend once or twice, you can comfortably work in it. And as somebody else said about the difference between C# and C++, any tool, like if you've used GIMP, you can kind of pick up Photoshop. If you've used any other tool relative, you can kind of get the other one, with the one exception being Blender, who decides to be this horrible beast of confusion compared to all of its contemporaries. But most other software, if you've used one version, you can use whatever the alternative thing is. So just you'll find it'll take you less than a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two, to get confident enough that it's on your register as a thing I can comfortably use. You don't have to be an expert, but at least you won't be frightened if you're thrown at it all of a sudden. So the answer is yes for you always. Treat your own experience as something to at least touch the boundaries of everything you think you might need. Honestly, most of the time, a couple of weekends will do enough just to give you that checkbox to move on and be comfortable with it.
Yeah, I agree. Get some experience in there. Be able to build Flappy Bird, Angry Birds, something simple at least.
Any experience is going to be valuable.
Definitely helps. There was a question about some other Unity products that I'm not very familiar with, and I was curious if you guys are. And the question just said, any thoughts on Unity projects such as Art Engine, Mars, Octane Renderer, Forma, etc.? Are there any practical use for small developers, or are they primarily targeted at enterprise? And again, I think I've loosely heard of some of these, but I don't really know the details of any of them. Do you guys know much about any of these things?
When Art Engine came out, I used Substance Painter a lot, and it's somewhat similar. I don't know if it's supposed to be competition or not necessarily, but it's very similar. And so I looked into it, and I was like, this is kind of cool. You can make different textures essentially with AI and other things, and that's cool. And then I saw the pricing page, and I said, oh, it's not for me, and I closed it. it was like 10x the cost or more. It's over 1,000 a year. I don't know what the price is actually, but it was so much that it was clear that it was not for a solo developer at all.
Well, it looks like they've got it now. It's $19 a month at the low end and $333 at the studio high end. I don't know what the difference is. Oh, not quite as
it
crazy,
wasn't,
but still relatively
yeah,
pricey.
it
I
wasn't
guess I
19 a
don't
month then.
understand. I
That's
don't know
the
what
same
the
price
difference
as
is.
Substance, so they must be trying to compete there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the probably easy answer to this one is, look at the price and then look at if you have to contact Unity to get it. If you have to contact Unity to get it, it's probably for enterprise. And if the price is astronomical, then it's for enterprise. I mean, all the CAD stuff that Unity do with, what is it, PXYZ, that's pretty much all enterprise stuff. I mean, you can build a small business out of producing CAD and putting it into Unity and all the rest, but it's an enterprise product.
What about the Mars AR stuff? Have you guys used that at all?
We looked at it for one project once. There was some client project, and we looked at it again. It was an AR project, and we went again. We didn't use it for whatever reason, but I haven't actually properly had to use it. And the rest I've heard of at a glance, but honestly, no, not used any of the other things.
Oh, okay. And it looks like that one's a layer on top of the AR core and AR kit stuff and
Yeah, it
HoloLens
is, yeah.
to kind of wrap all of that. Interesting. And I don't know what form it is either. So many Unity things out there. They've got so many freaking products now and growing so fast that I don't even know what all these things are. Oh, real-time 3D marketing. Yeah, that does not sound like something I would likely use, but I guess I could see it. All right. Anyway, so I guess we don't have a whole lot of insight into that. Were there any other questions that have been popping up that you guys were kind of interested in or wanted to answer?
There's the question for Jason, that geographical job listing one by Mr. Bubbles. Americans often, which
well, let's see what Mr. Bubbles got to say. It says Americans often say how easy it is to get an entry-level game job. But Story, can you speak to this here in Europe? I found it very difficult, wondering if this was a personal or geographic issue.
We have had a few conversations where other Jason has made a few comments, and I've chuckled here at how completely unrealistic that is from my experience. That has certainly occurred. It really does depend on whether you're in a tech hub or not. That being said, my opinion on this is probably, I wouldn't take it as advice. I would take it as personal opinion. I don't think that's as valuable these days. Like, again, if you happen to be living in the middle of LA or whatever, and you have access to people, and you can go do stuff, cool, go that route, find an incubator and get you and your friends' projects built up with financing. If you're in the rest of the world, usually my recommendation is, like, you don't need to have an entry game job. Like, I worked in a bank for years, and then I did other tech stuff, and then I did other programming stuff, and I found my way into game development through forums and subreddits and communities and Discord channels. My general advice is that people who like X thing will hang out in communities about X thing. You make friends, you make contacts, you get opportunities, and stuff happens. So I think aside from that really rare case of literally being able to go to a physical incubator office and do all the fun stuff there, if it's just about getting the kinds of opportunities you want, it's about people, and people are online these days. Like, you don't need that as much as you think you do. Again, different story if you want to work for a specific game studio and you want to get a particular job. Sure, you have more hoops to jump through. But if you're just saying, I want to get into games somehow, set your sights lower, aim for indie stuff, and you will find somebody who wants some indie help somewhere very, very quickly if you make yourself useful and valuable in communities online. You just will. You will meet people who know stuff, and you'll have friends of because, like we've said, people here like have all worked vaguely at different things, and everyone's got it. Like, I know about 20 people who at some stage, oh, I worked at Sony at X, or I did whatever, because it's not that impressive anymore to have one or two like big name titles in your roster, because people can do it because it's part of jobs. You just move around, and when you get to 20s and 30s and whatever, you've probably worked in some big companies, and so you'd be surprised how easy it is to find a friend who has worked at a company at somewhere that you might want to work at. So it may feel a million miles away over in Europe, but the truth is, like, make good friends and you will find contacts. I wouldn't worry. I just don't stress about it. It's basically the only advice. Again, personal opinion, not life advice. Just what my personal belief is to just relax on the whole thing.
Yeah,
portfolio.
I agree with that.
I always just say to people that are looking for entry game jobs and stuff like that, portfolio, show me stuff you're doing, you're playing with. It doesn't have to be the most amazing thing out there.
Yeah.
But you need to show me something you're doing. I used to get a lot of, well, I still do get a lot of applications that are, I've just come out of university or I've come out of college or I've just come out of school and I've got this qualification from that school. And I'm like, well, what have you done? What do you mean, what have I done? Show me the stuff you've been doing. I don't care if it's stuff you did at school, but I want to see a portfolio. And that never used to be the case for programmers. But nowadays, if you're coming into the games industry as a programmer, I want to see stuff you've done. And I don't care if it's programmer or all the way through. I want to see what you're doing. So give me portfolios. And it's so easy to have your portfolio up now if you've got public Gits or itch.io pages and stuff like that. Somebody mentioned game jams in the chat. Yes, go to game jams. It's a great way to meet people. It's a great way to make connections. I mean, me and Jason Weimann here, we used to do game jams together all the time. And the amount of entry-level people that were turning up would get the chance to sit there and chat to us about things. And I've hired people from game jams that I've been really impressed by. And I've been like, right, yeah, you're great. You're coming to work for me. So yeah, get out there basically and get your portfolio done. If you don't have a portfolio, you're just lazy.
Yeah, the question it's saying if Americans say it's easy to get entry game job, like where are you looking? Are you looking online? Are you on LinkedIn? Are you networking? Are you already going to game jams? Are you exhausting all avenues that you possibly can? You know, not knowing what your situation is, Mr. Bubbles, but It is not easy to just get an entry game job in America either. Of course, now with the fact that more places are remote, it should be much easier. That's where like things like portfolios and stuff become way more important, especially in the design space. But yeah, like if you're not networking, if you're not like doing something as simple as going to a game jam or something like that, once again, you know, if they're near you or you're able to, then you are definitely not exhausting all avenues. I mean, unless you're like going up the ranks, you know, you get in at doing something else at the game studio, like I did with customer service, and then you end up going, you know, spending multiple years getting to a game opportunity. Then, you know, it's so organic now. Like it's just, you know, talk to people, jump on LinkedIn, see what people are posting on LinkedIn. You may not know, get some connections here and there, see who they're talking to. Just ping someone personally, see if you get a response, go to a game jam, build a portfolio, put yourself out there. So at some point, someone's going to grab you, someone's going to talk to you. If you get a face-to-face opportunity, that's even better. There's definitely plenty of opportunity. And because it's just all digital, like you can definitely find it, regardless of geography. You can definitely ping people, get into chat groups or whatever it may be, and just get something going, build something, get some friends. I don't agree that it's easy for entry dev jobs out here, easier than other places.
I wanted to just point out one of the things that you mentioned too, though, which was getting in through other positions, because a lot of the people that I know have done that. You did that, I did that, like going in through, you know, customer service or the QA department or some other team where you can get in, meet the other developers, because once you're in there, you're talking to the other developers, you're meeting them, and
Yep.
you know, assuming you're not a dick, you're becoming friends with them, and if you've got the same skills as them or you're getting on par with them, it's a whole lot easier to just move up in the company most of the time than it is to get in. So if you can get in some of those opportunities, I'd jump on it. But I also was kind of curious from Dave's perspective, because he was in the game industry in England and London and in the game industry in LA. Do you think it's easier to break in LA or in this area than it is over in London or other part? I don't know how much you know about all the other parts of Europe. I assume that everything that's not the United States is all just one big country, right?
Sort of caveat with that. When I was in England was 2000, and then when I moved to America, it was 2012. So I'd already been in the industry for like 12 odd years. So when I
the
came
industry
here,
has changed
I didn't
quite a
take
bit,
an
I guess.
entry-level job. I was the
But
CTO of companies.
you've seen lots of people go into entry level.
I have, and I've hired lots of people. The difference, I don't think it's hard wherever you are anymore to have something to show. How you make that impression when you talk to somebody and you interview an orator is something completely different. If you're finding it hard to get an entry job, it's more, is it hard to find entry jobs? Like if you're looking and you're seeing none, then that's one thing. But if you're looking and you're seeing loads, there's another thing. And is that geospatial? I don't know. It depends where you actually are. I mean, I was in London, which of course was a big tech hub, and then I moved to LA, which is another big tech hub. But I've been out to Canada and a lot of other places to see those tech hubs. Well, I didn't go out there; I just basically talked to them. But the job offers I've had have come from around the world in those sort of things once I passed that entry. Now, what I didn't go the other route of doing something different when I went to go. I went straight into a programming position into games, but I actually had a job outside the games industry before I came in, and that was my actual entry into it. I started doing geospatial coordinate systems, mathematics for building maps in different shapes for different countries. And I did that to start off with, and then I started building Maya tools for that company. So I was building 3D modeling tools for Maya using the Maya API. And that's how I got my in. I then saw a job, which was a middle job for a tools developer at Sony. And I basically applied to that and got that job because I had all that Maya experience from that other company. So that's how I went in. I went into a company that could get me into the games industry by doing a few years there. But out of university, I was fairly lazy. I just picked a job in my hometown that happened to have some art development in it, and then basically used that as a pivot to get to it. But on a point of all this stuff, it's easier now than it was then to have that portfolio. And like the engines are back in the day, back in 2000, to build a game that you could show was a hell of an undertaking. Now it's not. So it's not an excuse to not have something.
Yes, that's why also, it's kind of become a requirement.
Yeah.
Also, the whole portfolio thing, I just want to put an asterisk there too, because I think a lot of people think that means you must have made 5 games or something. Like, no. I think what a lot of people miss is, so here's the brass tacks on this, is that you know nothing when you first start anything. That's just of course you don't know anything about it, and your proof of work is literally 0. And so a lot of people ask this question going, I'm not getting any jobs. It's like, yeah, but you've got nothing. Nobody knows you, and you've got no experience, and you've not shown it. And a lot of people kind of go, oh, well, it's a catch-22. I need to be in a studio to make it. No, none of that's true. Like, it's about putting yourself out there, and it doesn't even just have to be about games. Like, I'll be honest, when I'm hiring somebody, I like super sleuth. I will go down the rabbit hole of, have they ever written an article about something they were trying to figure out? And if I find someone who's written an article about ranting about the performance implications of materials in Unity or something, it's like, I already know more about this person from that than I do most other nonsense essay writing in their portfolio page. Like, a portfolio doesn't necessarily have to be, this is literally the work I've done every time. It can be, your GitHub is a classic one everyone talks about, but it's more than that. If you've got a YouTube channel where you did a devlog one time about a project you worked on, I'll probably skim it. Like, it obviously depends on who's hiring, whether they're going to put the time in. But if you make it to the point that you're in contention for a job, they'll go down the rabbit hole and they'll look at the stuff you've put out there in the world, and that stuff you put out there is the global persona of what you're doing. And so, like, I just don't buy this excuse of I can't get a job because nobody knows my content. Yeah, because you've got nothing. There's nothing on the internet about what you can do. So put it out there. Go to places, go to forums, communities, make a Twitter account, post random images of crap you're playing with and working with. Like, it's very easy to put a face out there of somebody who is interested in and working on X. So we don't mean portfolio like a clinical list of games you made, just stuff about things you did that are hireable, you know?
Here's this little bit of code I did for a text adventure. Here's this little bit of code I did for this. I joined this games group at my university and looked at these things, and this is the part I took in it.
I think the other thing is, like, what does entry game job even mean in this context? Like, what are you, like, obviously we don't know specifically what he means, what he's going for. Is it just general game development? Is it programmer? And what do you consider entry level when it comes to what you're searching for? You probably won't find very many jobs that are just like vanilla, haven't done anything, we just want you in. those jobs are probably going to end up being like QA jobs or something like that at a development studio, just to get you in and get you acquainted with just the industry and then see where you go from there. But yeah, like showing any effort, showing your passion. I've done nothing, but I've done this, right? I haven't done anything in the industry, but I've done all this because I actually genuinely want to be a part of this industry. So I just do this stuff on my free time. That is it. Like that's your foot in the door there. That gets people interested in you. That's Jason coming across, the little things that you did and going, oh yeah, like I like this guy, and I can talk to him about this thing here that he did and see how he learned from it, how far that he would take it, things like that. Those little things are just like huge when it comes to, at this point, entry game job, which, to people's point, they are asking for multiple years of experience doing certain things, but that could very easily be, I built a grid-based Diablo style inventory system randomly one weekend just because I was interested in doing it, and here it is. That could definitely get your foot in the door.
Yeah, I think being able to show that stuff off. The blog too. We kind of loosely mentioned that a couple times here. I think Dave mentioned it, and a couple guys. That having some stuff that you're just writing and sharing and stuff. If you don't want to do videos or other stuff, and you're not constantly building up games and releasing those, just putting up a little article. It's super simple to set up a blog. It takes like 10 minutes. They're free. And you can go post up whatever kind of stuff you want. Just post some game development related things, progress of your stuff, screenshots of the stuff that you're using, any of that kind of stuff. That's cool. And when it comes to having a game to show off, I guess my main thing is like have one thing that you're focused on. Don't give them like a page of 30 games that are all terrible and then they have to go guess which one's the one that's not terrible. Just give them the one that's good. Give them like your best one, put your best foot forward and show that thing. You could show the other stuff, but don't, feature it and try to shove it all in their face. You really just want to show them the best thing first. Let them look at that. Because when you're looking at interview or people to interview, you've usually got a stack of anywhere from 5 to 50 of them that you're looking at, and you're going through looking at each person's portfolio. And if there are too many things, you may end up missing the good part. So just focus on highlight that good stuff.
And if we're going to go with the trying to get in the door and you're not getting in, make sure in your cover letter or your CV or something, you've got the words that are in the job advertisement. I always say this. It seems like a weird thing to say all the time, but make sure the words are there. Because Jason mentioned 15 to 50. When I was at Sony, we used to get way more than that. And they wouldn't even come to me first. They'd go through...
Oh, this is the filtered. Yeah. I was talking about the filtered list.
Filter that stuff down before it even got to me. Yeah. And so make sure the words that are in the job advertisement are in your resume and CV, because otherwise they might not get past the person that doesn't even know about the actual job itself. And you've used words that are different than what's in the CV and resume. It seems silly, but that's just the way it is. The number of CVs coming into some of these jobs, especially now, when there are so many people coming to the games industry, you've got to.
It's so easy to apply. You hit a button, right, and your thing gets submitted. Like, let's hit a button and apply for 50 jobs.
You don't even have to dress up for interviews anymore. You can just be on camera.
I wore a suit to my first interview as a game job, and I've worn a suit 3 times in my life. I wore a suit to my first job. And then I turned up and nobody was wearing a suit in that department. So I was like, okay, not wearing a suit anymore. Then I turned up into my Sony job interview and I was wearing a really nice suit, and I turned up and the guy hiring me looked like he was homeless. Hoodie on, big ass beard and all the rest of it. Kind of wandered in. He was hungover and all the rest. Great guy. Loved that guy to bits. But he said, oh yeah, this is great. You're hired. But one word of advice, don't come in wearing a suit. He goes, because whenever a suit enters the games, whenever a suit walks into one of the lobbies downstairs, it walks into the games area, people think they're about to get fired and that game's about to get dropped. So don't wear a suit in the office because it scares the living daylights out of everybody in there. So yeah.
See, I had, funnily enough, almost the exact opposite experience, because for me, it was software development, and I went into a job interview as, a student or just post-college, and went into a Japanese bank for a job, and I thought, I'm a software developer. I know the memes. Software developers live in a basement dungeon. You don't need to, I dress... There's no dirt on my clothes, but I'm fine. Like I don't need to go suit and tie. And then, I get that, and then afterwards I do the interview. It's like, okay, you got the job. But I pulled aside and said, but you need to wear a suit. I'm like, oh. And so for years working at that company, even though I am in the dungeon doing the coding stuff, everybody still wore suits. Japanese bank, very, very serious rule thing. So it's like, okay, so yeah, I had the exact opposite.
Yeah, I was working at GameStop and someone walked in and said, "You want to work at SOE?" I'm like, hell yeah. I went into an interview for technical support in like the best suit ever. And I sat across the table from two people who were just like, they just rolled out of bed and got the job. And like, yeah, you don't have to dress like that, man. This is like a $10 an hour job. Like this is now you're answering phones. You're gonna get abused all day. You probably don't want to be wearing that because you will be very unhappy. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say also I think I've talked about this before, but I got the job I have now, I got because I applied for a job I knew I wasn't qualified for. Absolutely knew, but I also knew that I was qualified for something there. And so I applied, wrote a cover letter that was very specific to, I'm not qualified for this job, but this is what I can do, which I think is unique. And sure enough, they were like, this is interesting. And I got an interview with the C-level people that were not supposed to be interviewing someone like me, and I got the job, and they created a position for me. And just because I had experience with publishing on the asset store, I had experience with making a game with Unity, nothing fancy, nothing super successful, but I was able to show I've done this, you need this, and I'm here. And they're like, you're right, we do need something like that, you're hired. And they just created a position. So just have a little bit of not arrogance, but just put yourself out there, be honest and open and upfront, and roll the dice a little bit. It didn't take much more than an hour of writing a cover letter to get that job, essentially.
The worst thing that can happen is that they say no, and you are in the same place you were before.
That's what I always tell my kids. Like, you literally have nothing to lose. All they can do is say no, and you don't have the job that you didn't have before.
I mean, actually, technically, it's a gain because you've now talked to someone else in the industry. They know your name. Even if they turned you down, your name might get floated somewhere else, or someone else may notice you that was in the interview and want to talk to you, or refer you to someone else. So.
Exactly, they might know somebody, be like, "Well, this other company my friend works at is looking for you, so you should go there."
So it's just a net gain in general.
And it's good you bring up the game thing. Even if you get turned down for the job, don't feel hard. Don't be afraid to turn around and say, "Well, why didn't I get the job?
Yes.
Can you give me some advice to move on to the next one? Can you help me out with this? Is something wrong with my resume? Is there something wrong with my CV? How did I interview? Because you might feel disheartened about missing the job, but a good interviewer will give you some feedback, will help you so that you can come next time. And when you see the job post up again, you can send in the resume, I actually applied for this last year, and I took the advice to heart of you saying this, this, and this. As you can see now in my resume, I've got this, this, and this, and in my portfolio, this. I hope this now meets the requirements. So get that feedback, ask for that feedback, and if they're good, some interviewers are arseholes, but a lot of them are nice, and they will turn around and give you that feedback, and that feedback will help you grow. It's the same as when you go in, if you don't get through the coding test. First thing you do is when you leave the thing, write down all the questions you were asked in the coding test, add them to a bank, and then basically you go through and you learn those off by heart next time, and you keep storing those up, and you'll get through the coding tests. Because I know some people struggle with those. You'll get through just by going to interviews and doing them online and stuff like that, and getting that feedback and improving yourself because you know what they're looking for now.
Yeah, why can be pretty powerful. Asking why can definitely, obviously be polite about it, but always after interviews, send a thank you email. If they're turned down, still send a thank you email for opportunity, and try to ask why. Ask why they're on the spot. Super useful. I have personal experience in exactly what you just described. I didn't make it through an interview, asked why, got the information, and said, all right, well, let me just focus on this. And bam, a year later, I applied, and they wanted to hire me, but then ended up closing the position. But ultimately, I did beat that boss. I got over that hump by just going back and improving myself and understanding where I was messing up or what I wasn't paying attention to. So yeah, that stuff is crazy useful. So you definitely want to always ask why when you think it'll help you out.
Also, I would say don't give up too early, because I know in my experience, at least once, I've had a time where I pretty much failed an interview. They had questions and I didn't have a very good answer. And then after that, about half an hour later, I emailed them a very detailed answer of a better solution of what I would do if I spent some time researching the problem and what solution I would use. And then I got the job. I was like, okay, perfect. They're like, yeah, that was impressive. The fact that like didn't know it, but then you're like, well, find the answer and find the optimal solution and send it over. So yeah, that I would say, don't necessarily just give up right away. I mean, it's always worth an extra shot. It doesn't hurt. Um, and then also, when you're interviewing with people, just make sure that you talk to them and be nice to them and ask them questions too, because people hire people that are friendly to be around, that they want to hang out with. They don't hire people that won't say anything and are completely silent, and you have to like struggle to be around and sit next to. So try to talk to them, try to ask them questions, find out what kinds of stuff they're interested in. Anything that you happen to both like, very good. And
I can say with complete honesty that there was people that I wanted to hire who were very technically proficient. They were a great candidate, but they were an absolute struggle to talk to because they were just really shy and awkward and uncomfortable. And the thing is, I was like, if we were having a lull in terms of work, I would happily hire this person and give them a month to get out of their shell. But we're very busy right now, and honestly, if I have work that needs to be assigned and done, I can't like play this social game with somebody while they get their kind of get themselves comfortable. So unfortunately, like I just had to pick someone else, and they were a good candidate. And I wanted to hire them, but like they're just not, because that can be exhausting. Like the truth, you have to, if you're being honest, it can be very exhausting having a person on your team who is not able to communicate, and they can, and it's not just for you. If you got a bunch of people, that can be really draining on a team because you're going to be having lots of meetings. And again, as someone who's done, if you're in charge of the team, part of a good project manager is going to be getting everybody's input, and some people are going to be more reticent to do that, and you have to know how to like get the loud people to be quieter and the quieter people to be a bit louder. But there's a point where you have to have a well-oiled machine of a team, and sometimes if there's one person that is fundamentally changing the culture of the team, it's not worth it. Like no matter how good they are at their job, we've also fired people for being just like taking over the culture of a team. So just relax. It really helps. It really does.
Collaborative environment where people don't talk is weird. It doesn't make any sense. You have to be social to some extent because communication is so key. I know and have and do work with plenty of people who are super shy, and they will spend days on a problem that, have they just sent a message and asked me, I could have said, hey, this one thing here will fix this, and this is how this works. Now you can get on to something else and learning something else. And that makes me sad because it feels like a failing on my part for not like reaching out or thinking maybe, just checking in with the person. But also, just ask like why, I do my best to try to be open to people and say I'm always available. And there's other people on my team are the same way, and still these things happen. And it's just all personality. Like I've learned that it is just personality, regardless of how you communicate. In the age right now where you can just send someone a Teams message or whatever, you don't have to even look at them. People still do not want to send messages. They won't put themselves out there. Maybe it's because they feel like, put out because they might have an issue and they shouldn't have issues or whatever. But when someone doesn't communicate in a creative, collaborative environment, it can be detrimental as hell.
I think. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I want to be really clear too, because it can sound like I'm saying being shy is not okay. That's not what I'm saying. I want to be very, very clear. I've worked with a lot of people who are very shy. Programmers, they tend to split into two camps. Egotistical loudmouths and really quiet shy people. Usually, so I'm used to working with a lot of shy people. So that's not what I'm saying. What I mean is, if there is somebody who's struggling at a problem, you can be shy to the point where you might like DM somebody and say, hey, I'm having a bit of trouble. When you have a bit of chance, can you come over and help me with this? And then there's you're so shy and uncomfortable that you're afraid to even mention that you're struggling. So you do nothing for 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden everyone turns to you going, and now for your bit, what? Oh, it's not done or so whatever. And then you said nothing and people could have helped you. And now the entire project and hundreds to thousands of dollars are out because a whole team of people have been actively trying to work towards the same goal, and you have like harpooned the whole project because you won't just ask somebody for help if you're struggling. So I really mean it's not about shyness. It's about fundamentally it's a team effort to do something. And if you're unable to communicate with other people, that's going to like really hamper things. You can be shy about it. There are ways to communicate people. You can wait till end of the day and just catch one person off to the side. You can ask for help. There's loads of ways to engage with somebody in a safer manner if you're uncomfortable. But like actively just sitting there and not engaging and not being helpful and saying nothing can kill projects. It really can.
Yep.
I would say to that point directly, I think yes, and it shows you that you are wanting to learn, wanting to be better, wanting to be part of the team and help out and all that stuff. And I think the fear of being, everyone's gonna think I'm silly for not knowing this. No, for the most, I mean, maybe some asshole would, but the reality is people want you to ask questions. They want you to say, I'm stuck and I need help. Can I so I can get unstuck and then we can keep going. But these are skills that I think you can practice on your everyday life. If you don't have a job in an office right now, if you're staying at home with COVID, you go to the grocery store, talk to the person who's doing your checking out. Say hello to somebody, not in a creepy way, of course, but just put yourself out there. And in situations where usually you don't have to say anything, but you could, try saying something, try practice talking, because it's not easy. And a lot of us do spend a lot of time just kind of being like, well, I don't have to talk, so I'm not going to. But if you start practicing the skills of talking, which is something you learn when you go to meetups, when you go to networking events, when you go out with your friends that maybe you can't do as much right now, I think it's helpful so that when you're in that interview, you can use those skills that you've practiced and just talk. And with that also, always learn something about the company. So you have a question or two to ask about the company to show them that, oh, you actually know what we do here. You actually, have an interest in what we're doing.
I think there's also another side to this. I guess it's a kind of psychological side to it, is that um, people have big personalities, who these people have to communicate with. Those people also have to recognize when their personality is big or intimidating. And the part of Jason saying that it's exhausting. It is exhausting because when you're dealing with multiple people, multiple personalities, if you are that big personality person or one of them, you have to basically be a chameleon when it comes to interacting with people. Then you get into a group environment. Someone's going to get forgotten about. Someone's going to get lost. Who kind of like goes in the corner, and it can be like crazy because in the end, if you are a person who's a senior or viewed as a leader or whatever, or the actual leader, it is a failing on your part, regardless of their behavior, because you're supposed to recognize and talk to these people and reach out to them. So it does make like the idea of hiring or bringing someone on. It's also culture fit. When you're in an interview, you are also being interviewed for a culture fit, and never forget that. So show who you are. Don't be afraid, and never be afraid to ask a question. And once again, ask why, because like it all comes back. And is considered in that you can have all the technical skills in the world, you can be perfect fit for the role, but you said 4 words. I'm sorry, like we need to talk, we need to communicate. And if you can't do that, then we'll find someone who's less qualified who actually talks more, and we'll just teach them because we know they'll ask a question.
I want to follow up on that with on what you said and what Andrew said. 2 things. First, with Andrew's suggestion on getting better at talking, Toastmasters is great for that. If you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it. I did it before. It's amazing. It helps you get rid of all the stutter words, the ums, the ahs, the other nonsense when you're talking to people, and just get better at getting your thoughts together when you're talking. It's like literally just practicing public speaking with a bunch of other people that are nervous as shit, so it's a lot easier. Everybody there is nervous. Everybody there is stuttering and stumbling through it because they're all in the same boat trying to get good. And there's like a couple people that are really good at it, and they're like, "Here's how you do it."
What is that?
Toastmasters. It's huge. It's worldwide. There's like 5 of them within like a 5-mile radius of my house alone. You just search for Toastmasters. It's great for public speaking. Been around forever. Highly recommend it if you want to get good at just talking to people. It made a huge difference for me. The other thing on the learning about the company that you're interviewing with, also check out the people that you're interviewing with. Not just the company, but the people. Find out what they like, what other games and projects they've worked on. They may have worked on your favorite game in the past. It can be an opportunity to talk and make it a little bit easier to get that conversation going. But then when Salim started talking, it reminded me of one of the things that I know Salim does every time, which is when he's going to apply somewhere, he plays the living shit out of their game. And he like becomes an expert at their game before he goes in for an interview. Like he plays and plays and plays it just nonstop and really understands what's going on with the game, what it needs, where it needs to go, and all that stuff long before he's able to talk about it intelligently. I think that's a huge thing that most people don't do. People come in and don't even know what it is that they're trying to work on.
When you research those people, don't go too deep. If you turn up to an interview with me and know my dog's name, I'm going to be scared.
Oh.
No, but if you go like, hey, I saw that cool electric chair
exactly.
you made. That was awesome. You Googled your company and
I've had someone creep me out in an interview. Yeah, I looked you up, man. You did this, and this, and you, dude. Whoa, man. I need to go get a glass of water.
Yeah, it was like, hey, I saw you did this interview about this Vanguard class that you made, and that was the coolest one I liked, or whatever. If there's something that you guys actually can talk about, it comes in really handy. I usually do that and like see like, hey, is there anything that we both have in common that we like, in case I don't know what to talk about. You can mention it, bring it up, or be prepared for them to bring it up.
I'm in danger of doing that because I love research anyway. I'm one of those people, so I'm exactly the kind of person who goes too deep of a dive if I do a research session. So I actively don't do that. What I do instead is I try to read cues. So if you're in an interview scenario, like it's a cliche, but people say their eyes light up. People's eyes light up when they're interested in a topic. Their body language, like if you say something that piques someone's interest, they'll go, oh, they'll literally, their body will lift, their eyes will open a bit. And it's not as subtle as you think it is. Like it's really obvious if you're paying attention. And so if you're talking about something, sometimes I'll throw out like a litmus test. I'll be like, oh yeah, so it's like in a game interview they might ask you, what games do you like? Oh, I like this and this and this. And I'm not, as I'm listing it off, I'm looking at them. And as soon as somebody does a little, oh, I like that game, then like I know I've like grabbed something to talk about. And I don't need to have done a big deep dive to do that. I can just I can tell from reactions whether like this is an avenue to continue talking about. And oftentimes if you say something that intrigues somebody, they'll like leap on top going, yeah, I love that game. It's like, and then suddenly it's like, okay, we have a connection of some kind. Let's see if I can milk this a little bit and kind of get this, learn more about the person that way. And then it feels more organic. So.
And the big thing about doing that is that once you've got control of the interview like that, and you guys are just kind of riffing and going back and forth, you're not even being interviewed anymore. You are interviewing them to see if you want to work there because you won. I mean, it is ultimately just like a quick battle because they're not even asking you questions about the job anymore. They're just talking about personal stuff and all this, that, and the other. And you're like, man, we talked about the job for like 5 minutes and it's like a 2-hour interview. Awesome. I think I'll be getting an offer tomorrow.
That you brought actually. There was a good point, Salim, that you brought up that I still struggle with the idea that when you're in a job interview, you're interviewing them as well. And that it didn't make sense to me because, I worked self-employed stuff, just doing my own things for so long that when I went in for an interview, I was like, I got to get this job. I got to make them like me. And then once I had a job and I started interviewing people, they were saying, we really want this candidate. We really want them to say yes. And we're like, wait a minute. I was like thinking, wait, so we're like trying to get them to say yes, but don't they want the job because they're interviewing? And then it turns out, no, a lot of people, they could take any number of jobs. And so part of the interview is us trying to get the candidate to like us enough as well, which is an interesting concept. And once you realize that, then it might kind of make you a little less nervous about the process because it is a two-way street and they want you to be good and you want them to be. So it's just an interesting thing that I never thought about until I was exposed to it from somebody saying that.
I think it's also one of the biggest cues in resumes. Like if we were to do a quiz, anybody who's ever hired somebody, if you shuffled 100 resumes and threw them on the table and said, we've scrubbed off the names and the life experience, which one of these are beginners and which one of these are experienced? I'll be honest, most of us here could like pretty evenly divide that because there's a, quite frankly, reek of desperation for people who it's their first or second job where they really feel like they are exactly like Andrew was saying, they're trying to prove themselves to the employer, when people who've worked for a while knows that no, this is like, we are tying ourselves together for a few years. I need this to be as beneficial for me as it is for them. And so it's a lot less about trying to sell yourself and more about, this is what I can do. If it matches what you need, we can talk. And so there's a sense of that in even just the resume itself, never mind in the interview. So I find there's, like, some people might call it confidence, and it is to a degree, but it's less about like bravado or ego. It's more, I have done stuff like this before, so it doesn't scare me. Like, it's not about being actually overconfident. It's a difference between like feeling like you need to justify that you even know the basics versus, no, I know the basics. I do that. That's what I do. Like, very noticeable.
You've refined the experience. You know how to, what to cleave off at this point, and what to focus on. It's just experience.
Is there, when you guys are looking at the resumes, is there anything specific that you kind of like want to see or look for, like, or look for as a bad thing that you see on there, or like big mistakes that people just commonly make? I mean, I've seen a couple really obvious ones, like simple misspelling shit or terrible formatting. I've seen those before, and I'm just like, okay, this isn't going to work, because if you can't spell like the thing to get the job right or format it right, like what the fuck are you going to do to the code, right? It's going to be it's already scary. Like, this is just one single document. But I'm sure there are all kinds of other things that people do wrong. You guys got any ideas of just stuff to call out that's maybe a little less obvious?
People flooding their resume with basically everything in the kitchen sink, instead of putting on there what is relevant to the position, and then getting more detailed with that, because obviously you don't want your resume to be like crazy long. I mean, I've had people with a bunch of misspellings. I had obviously a copy and paste where a guy had like a descriptor at the top of it that was related to another type of job, I think like an entry-level job, but he was applying for a later job. He was being bold, but he had the same thing as an entry-level thing. So it's really just like, which like goes to how meticulous you are, how much you pay attention to what you're doing, how much effort you put into this. I even had a dude misspell his name. So I've had all kinds of goofy stuff. But
misspell his own name?
Yeah, he misspelled his one. His resume said one thing, his cover letter said a different one.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, that's just a typo. That could be nervousness or whatever, but really you don't have an excuse, because like this is something you wrote.
Right, and
100%. That's a big one for me. Is that like no one's at gunpoint forcing you to write your resume. You can sit there for 3 weeks before you apply and like really send it to somebody. Send it to somebody to spell check it for you. Like one I got once in the interest section. There was my favorite thing I've ever seen in a resume. A guy wrote, "I am electric guitar." It was so funny, and
that could be his stage name.
Yes, yeah.
Do you guys find those interest sections in any way useful? I could only see it useful if like you happen to align interests with the person who's reading it. Because other than that, like who the hell cares that you like to ski or whatever it is you like to do?
If you've done research on the person, and your interests are in line, then I would say, add it there. If the person interviewing you is like into comic books or whatever it might be, whatever the hobby might be, I would add it there. But like I put military service on my stuff whenever I realize someone who I'm interviewing with has served or something like that. I will list that as just an additional thing. My time in the Navy. Otherwise, I just leave it off. I think like if you can identify certain things, and I think those little extra tidbits that aren't necessarily relevant to the thing can be useful to get the conversation going that we were talking about earlier in the interview.
It's a point of bias, that section. Saying I ski or I play golf. Those are like class level things that some people will never be able to say. And so, while bias is bad, that it's a thing that people, hurts their opportunities. While it exists, use it. And I think, Salim, to your point about the military experience, what you're doing there is saying, hey, this person, I think they're going to be biased towards people who have military experience. So I'm going to make sure they know I have that in order to trigger that bias in my favor. Perfectly fine thing to do while you're trying to get a job, in my opinion. Even though we would love a world without bias, use it to your advantage if you can.
I am electric guitar.
Yeah.
Honestly, after that one, we couldn't concentrate the whole rest of the day because every other resume, like someone would turn to the other person seriously. Yeah, they're pretty good. They're good, but are they electric guitar though? I don't think they're electric. It just became this running thing. We couldn't concentrate.
Man.
He stood out though. He stood out. I think the
True.
interest section can make you stand out amongst the crowd. I actually ignore it for some of the points that Andrew said and some of the other points. Like I have no. I don't care about your interests if you're applying for a job with me. I want to know you're into games or development or whatever. But I go because I get so many. I'll go. The experience is there. I go to their link to their LinkedIn or their blog or their website or their YouTube or whatever. I'll look at a bit of that and I'll go tick. And this is what I do. I go through and I quickly tick loads of them, put them to the side and get rid of a load of others. And then I'll bring those ones back that I've ticked. And then I'll go, okay, I'll dig in a little bit deeper and go through it. But if somebody just gives me, this is my work experience and there's no links or anything like that, unless that work experience is like really shining, and if they haven't got anything out there or anything like that, they might get a phone call or an email just to say, what can you show me? If their experience is really shining.
The idea of like the work experience stuff, one thing that's a huge red flag for me, and it's like, as I said, the same thing. Anybody who does bulk resumes, you do a first pass, you trim anybody who's irrelevant, and then you go through and actually start to pay more attention the second time around. One thing that gets somebody out of the first pass for me almost immediately is when I read through their job descriptions and there's something that's flowery language, to be polite. It's where someone is like, I was a finance organization specialist working under the, oh, you did a till at McDonald's. Got, okay, cool. Like what a lot of people don't realize is that we know you don't have experience. If you're hiring a graduate or a starting position, you don't, like, and we're not expecting you to. And if you instead throw the dictionary at us to try and hide and somehow trick us into thinking you've done, stock management professional at whatever, it's like you did stock management. We've all, like, anyone who's ever grown up and worked at a bar, we've done that. It's not, like, you can be honest and say, I did these things. Some of it was valuable. But if you're going to give me like a paragraph of how it changed you as a person, and you're suddenly a super genius because you did some, like, that it feels to me like you're starting on the wrong foot. You're starting by lying to me. You're starting by trying to convince me of something you yourself don't even believe. You're just writing it in. If someone just wrote, worked at a place, did some stuff, worked at a place, and then put in the ones that are preferably relevant, even if you don't have relevant experience, I don't care as much. But if you start giving me this essay stuff, you're out immediately. Just done. I'm just not paying attention.
And on the reverse of that, if you're going for a more senior job and you find that you're struggling to put all your work experience on one page or two pages at very most, get rid of the barista job. It was 12 years ago and you've been a senior developer at this place, this place, and this place.
Oh, God.
Chuck it off. I've seen ones where it's like going through stuff like I was a paper boy. It's like, you are 40 years old. I don't care. Like, please just give me give me work experience. I mean, you could say I've been in the industry for so and so and so and so, and then give all these experience. If you're struggling to get that stuff on, concentrate on the stuff that's really important, and don't give me a 10-page resume. It won't get read. I'll go through the first 2 bits that I've just said about and give you that tick. And if you don't make that, it will go to the side.
I mean, your resume is ultimately like just a quick elevator pitch of who you are, because it's just to get you in the door, and then you finish off the rest. So yeah, it's got to be 1 page or something like that. Like if in the first couple stints of your experience, someone doesn't see what they want, then you're good. I don't think anything on the bottom half of the page, certainly not the paperboy portion, is going to get you in the door if the other stuff isn't. Someone up here just asked, is it a negative to not have a LinkedIn or Facebook or anything? And I would say 100% it is. You should have at least a LinkedIn nowadays, if not something else. But yeah, so I just wanted to put that out there because I saw it and Jason didn't post it. But yes, please get on there, have a portfolio, have a LinkedIn, have something someone can go to and see who you are.
Make your Facebook private.
Just don't make your
don't make that public. There's probably not a good reason for that. It's just there's going to be something in there that somebody will find that they don't like to disqualify you. So
yes.
It'll be some random opinion you had or some argument you had with an old high school friend or something stupid. I would just say make that don't make all that stuff public. But your LinkedIn, definitely put that up there once you have a little bit of stuff. I barely use LinkedIn, but I still get contacted all the time, and it reminds me of like who I worked with and other people that like. So there are some people that like I forgot I worked with them, and I see like, oh yeah, shit, I remember that. Like it's been so long, and you get people reaching out to you and talking through there over time, so it's pretty useful.
So you remember that you worked with me, right? You remember that?
Wait, we worked together? Were you on one of my projects? Salim, how do you say that? Grant?
I hate you.
I know. So when you guys do send in resumes, I assume you guys send in like a custom one to everybody that you apply for. That's kind of been my habit ever since I started wanting jobs. Like I customize it, and I have like this is the one to Sony, this is the one to Microsoft, and I put a dash at the end so I know like who this is targeted to and like what the wording is and stuff. Do you guys kind of go through that same process?
Yep. The luxury of experience is you can filter depending on the job now. Like I have done web and mobile and Android and backend stuff and Azure and AWS and whatever. But like if I'm applying for a job, to kind of to the point we just mentioned, like I don't send everything I've ever done ever because I know it's not relevant. I will literally filter in order. You probably care about this technology because I know myself when I read a resume, I'm looking for 4 technologies preferably, and like specifically 4 I need, 3 that would be ideal, and then a couple of other things that might be nice, and I'll look for those keywords. And if they've got like more than half of them, they're already in the, before I look at anything else, they're already in the pile because at least I know they're qualified to start with, and then I can go through and filter. So I give them that list, and then everything else is a bonus. I can make multiple resumes that are like, oh, this is a web job. Here's all the web stuff I've done. And I might like put 1 or 2 things. And if it comes up in conversation, I can mention I've done Unity if they want to embed a WebGL, whatever. But like probably they want the web stuff and vice versa.
And ultimately, if they want to know more, they can just go to LinkedIn and find out more about you anyway. So, having that refined resume is key.
And if on your resume you have links, make them clickable.
Yes. Oh God, yeah.
Like, yeah, it's so annoying to have to type something in because it's come through as an image. And you're like, oh, this person has the longest LinkedIn because they didn't customize their LinkedIn afterwards. So it's still got all those characters there. You're like, oh, if you're sending PDFs of your resume and all the rest of it, make those bits clickable because it's super annoying.
Yeah, use Bitly or something too if you want to. Well, one thing I will say as well to counter my own point is also whatever you put on your resume, you better be willing to do. And this is actually a hard lesson, and it may not seem as obvious on the face of it, but you will have done things you hated that are technically experience, and you might be like, well, I did 2 years of that, and it looks good that I did 2 years of it. Well, then what if you get that job? And it can actually be very disheartening if you put something that you actually don't like doing. Someone mentioned React, so it reminded me of this. Put it on your resume as like, oh, I've done that in the past. And if you get that job, well, congrats, you just got a job you won't want to do. And that's like not, no one wants that. That's not good for them. That's not good for you. So if there's stuff that you don't want to do, don't put it on your resume because you'll get the job. You might get that job.
Totally agree. I've had that happen before too. And I actually ended up turning down a job because I got the interview based on something on there that I should have removed, and then ended up removing it and not interviewing for those positions anymore accidentally. I wanted to first ask everybody to just hit the thumbs up button so we can get up to like a couple thousand likes real quick. We're already at 145, so we're almost there. But then I was curious. One of you had mentioned these multi-page resumes, and I have seen a couple that were like 5 pages long, and always wondered like, is there any value to this? Like, who the hell wants these? And they're like these detailed ones that are very industry specific on like all of the things they did for that industry at the jobs. It seems like a terrible thing for me, but like, have you guys ever seen value in that? Is there ever anybody that wants these giant like novels of a resume?
I don't know why you would want one nowadays. A quick 1-2 pager, cover letter, may prefer it or not, with links. Like, if I want to know more about you, if you invested time to prepare for an interview, I should invest time researching who you are, which means I should go to the links, go to the more information that you provided me if I want to know more. But like, I don't want to flip through, multiple pages of a thing. It's just, a wall of text. I want something bolded, nice, simple, to the point. that is focused on the position that you are applying for, with optional more information to go after. I don't see why anyone would want a 5-page resume. What even is that? I can't imagine anyone wanting that unless unless there's a very super specific reason for it. And at that point, it's not a resume. It's something else they're asking for. They're just calling it a resume or a CV or something like that.
Well, I think that the smartest version of this I've ever seen is somebody who had a short resume, but then expressly said at the end, link to my website, lots of details there. And their website had a dedicated slash subpage, which was effectively a 5-page resume. It was vivid details about all the technologies and the companies, and even little mini funny stories about companies they worked at and fun projects there.
Oh,
that's
cool.
great, because that's entirely it's not in the resume. But if you've made it to the stage that I'm actually going line by line, and I see that, I'm yeah, okay, I'll click the website, and then if I enjoy the website, I'll go through it. Now that's it's an option for me, but you didn't throw noise at me to start.
If you're worried that the work experience you've already got doesn't actually cover something that the job you're going into, then put a section in there that says, I've done this. Here is the link to it that's relevant to the job that I'm going for. So even if it's not in your work experience, but you have it, you can just put that link there. You don't have to put all the images and everything on the separate pages or massive details on the other page. You just say, I've done this that's relevant to this particular job. Here is the link. Go get it.
Makes absolute sense, for sure.
Focus on those things. Put those things up at the top. That's the thing I always do. Reorder the resume for the job. So, Phil mentioned, by the way, on these long ones that in science and engineering field, they have
I can see that.
short ones and then super long ones. And as I think about it, most of the people who I saw the crazy long ones for were electrical engineers, some type of engineering jobs. And they were either applying for software stuff or showing me their other ones. And they're, just huge. So anyway, do you guys want to take a couple more just questions from chat and see what people are curious about, or do you have any more to talk about on this whole getting a job and getting hired thing?
Yeah, some questions.
Okay, so if anybody's got questions, I guess just drop them in chat and we'll take a couple of them and see if we can get the best answers out there. While you're at it, hit the like button and go share the stream, and maybe your question will get seen by more people. Let's see what kind of stuff comes in. If you guys see a question pop up, let me know.
Somebody did put something about not having a community in your country and all the rest. I'm currently doing a game jam where there are people from across the world. So on itch.io, you can go and find all these game jams, and they're open across the world unless you're going to that particular thing, but most of them are online now. And a lot of them have Discords, so you can then go on and talk to the rest of the community there. And we've got a Discord going on this VR Super Jam where we're chatting away about the jam and what we're doing and how we're getting on and stuff like that, and making some good connections and friends and all the rest. And it's all online. So I'm talking to somebody, quite a few people in Europe at the moment, and I'm based in LA. Don't let the accent fool you. But yeah, so even if there isn't a community in your particular country, if you can get on itch.io and go to those game jams and these meetups that are basically all online, you can still meet that community.
All that stuff is streamed. All stuff that's being worked on is visible. People can talk in chat and see what's going on. Nice.
Yeah, it's all good. And I mean, itch.io game jams are super fun. If you're just starting out, it's a great way to get in there and put some games up and just have some fun with people and meet the community.
Yeah, it's really nice how game jams are no longer a rare thing. It used to be you had to wait for one and they would happen. Now it's there's always at least a couple running. You just have to figure out with the timing for the ones that you're interested in.
Yeah, me, Jason, and two other guys used to basically go in a little group team to all these jams. We used to get in a car and drive off around LA or Orange County and find these game jams and play.
Yeah, those are a lot of fun.
Those were.
And just being consistent and going up and meeting people, and you'll find that I think if you do the online ones too, you get the same experience. You'll see the same people that come back in each time and start returning and start to build up those friendships and relationships. Plus, you don't have to stay there in person, so it doesn't have to just last for 3 days or whatever. There's another question. Do you have any entry level jobs that have been using Unity? Oh, do any of you guys have any entry level jobs or know of any? Or I guess here's a better question. Since I assume none of you guys are hiring, unless you happen to be, do you know of a good place to start looking for entry level jobs online? Assuming that or are you guys, any of you happen to be hiring? Where do you guys
I
look
don't
for
know.
jobs? So, say a friend asks you where to look for some Unity jobs. Where do you guys normally recommend? I've got two places that I generally send people to. I'm curious where you guys go.
LinkedIn is pretty good that I recommend to people. I don't go out as much for jobs. I get a lot of referrals, so I don't have to do it an awful lot. Actually, I haven't put a CV together or a resume for donkey's years. I hate to think what my old CV looks like. Remember, I used to have one of my indie games, like a little robot and a teddy bear in the corner of one of my CVs.
Was it pink?
Absolutely awful.
On nice pink paper and scented?
It had a blue line down the side of it because it was the trend at the time to put a piece of color down the side and then have a picture of something like your profile picture of a game you worked on or something, and then all your work experience. It was awful. It's got the job, so it done its job at the time. But yeah, formatting back then was pretty terrible. But no, I mean, I use I recommend LinkedIn. Indeed is another one that some people come. Be careful with
Indeed.
Some of these ones.
I just want to jump in and caveat that I still see jobs on Indeed for companies that I worked at that don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Wow.
You beat me to the caveat.
So watch out.
Is the other thing with and all that stuff not around, or it's still valid?
Yeah.
Is that bad, or
which one?
Gama Sutra.
So I don't. They did a relaunch of their site. I haven't looked at the jobs part of it, but they did a relaunch of their site and a redesign like a month ago or something, maybe 2 months ago. I think that they still have the jobs board up there. That was one of the places that I used to like to look. Another one was the Cyber Coders page, which is like it's a smaller version of Indeed, but it's just code, and they had a lot of
recruiters though.
What on there?
The Cyber Coders are a recruitment company, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like an Indeed. It's just like those companies. You just post your job on there.
One thing I will say about a lot of those is if you find a job on there, then have a look and see if that, because a lot of times recruiters will find jobs on LinkedIn or anything like that and then post them on another site, even though they have no direct connection to them. So do a little bit of research when you find a job. If it's through a recruiter, you might be able to find it directly from the company. I don't want to steal from recruiters as such, but you can go and find them. Those jobs being advertised at other companies, it's always best to apply directly to the company with those sort of things.
A lot of the time,
you could also optionally, I mean, if you're on Steam or anything, you can just like search for a game or something you're interested in working on and the other games of that type, and then look at the studio that's doing it and go to their website and see if they're hiring.
Great advice.
Yep. A lot of game companies have a jobs site on their page, like a little job section. They're hiring and they'll post their jobs right there, and they don't want to go out and post them other places because people will just come and look and apply anyway. They don't have to. It's definitely
also like a lot of them just have a literal tab on their webpage, right? Like literally they're saying we hire. Here's our company, right? So feel free to just check that out too.
And if they don't have that tab, look for the about tab, because then they'll get the team and then they have the careers under there and it will be in that particular tab.
Sometimes you gotta look for it.
The other one I wanted to call out was the Unity Job Forum. So I know they brought that back. Like they had the whole community thing, but before that there was
it's gone around the houses.
What's that?
It's gone around. It was posted as a standard forum, and then it went to that other one, and now it's gone back to the forum again.
Yeah. And then that forum, I've hired people and had jobs off of there before, and it's been relatively successful because it's just open forum, and you can literally just go on there and like look at people's stuff that are available, or you can post a job and put in details, and people will just reply and talk. And I found it to be a pretty good place to hire people that are really active because you're not going to find like the people who just graduated have no interest going on to the forums and applying. They're going on to Indeed. They're going on to the things where they can just instantly submit a resume, not where they have to talk to people. So the people that I found on the forums tended to just be more engaged and more involved and like actively doing Unity stuff and looking at the forums for other reasons as well. So it seems to be a decent place. At least it used to be. I don't know. I haven't hired anybody off there since the change again, but I would look there as well. Cool. Any other questions pop up you guys are curious about? I saw that Gamma Sutra got bought out. It's kind of interesting. I didn't realize that was the cause for it. I guess that makes sense. The site was I hadn't really seen it much going on there for a while. So, and then somebody asked about what about getting on an open source project? Is that a good way to build up contacts or a portfolio? I've never done that as like a contact or portfolio building type thing, but I know people who have.
So.
I don't really know how it's gone. What about you guys?
I would imagine that would be a good way to. I mean, it's just more getting together and collaborating and meeting people, right? It's more networking. So I don't see why it would be bad. If anything, it's experience. So why not? If you're genuinely interested in it, once again, it's just showing more passion. You did something that was open source on your own time, and you made this thing. It's in your portfolio. I don't see why it wouldn't have some benefits. So sure. Anything where you get to interact with more people, or you get to get hands-on with something that exists, because creation from scratch is difficult. But if you have something that exists that you can practice on and mess with, and then like get it out to other people, and then get comments and feedback on it, yeah, that's just that experience alone is good. But then those people that are giving you feedback, you're networking, other people working open source that you're getting advice from, it's all going to be positive. So yeah, I'd say it's probably a good avenue to explore if you're interested in it.
Yeah, it can make sense. I've also seen a lot of people in the past, this is going to sound a little bit weird, but who have volunteered on projects and like joined teams as volunteers on all kinds of different games, doing things anywhere from like volunteer customer service up to, volunteers doing code work. And then eventually they just, they either peter out and stop, don't do it, or they roll into some full-time position and they start to actually get the experience and understand it. Because a lot of time, like they're coming in at the beginning, and to be honest, they just can't add value. Like they're coming in and it's just a cost having them volunteer there. They're really not. They're not putting in any more than the time and energy they're taking out of the rest of the team. So there's no way to put them in there as a junior developer and have it make sense. But they'll join in as a volunteer working on the thing however much time they've got, and then like I've seen that happen more times than not. It's really weird, and I don't think that's a thing that happens outside of the game industry, or at least that I've seen happen outside of the game industry. I think it's probably just because nobody wants to volunteer to do other kinds of work. Game dev work's fun, and the rest of it's mostly not. So there was a question: do companies make you take a Unity test of some kind? I thought this is kind of interesting.
Yes.
When you're applying for a job, when you hire people, or when you've gotten hired places, did you have to do some Unity tests, competency that make sure that you could code or get around the editor or do some tasks?
I have one.
Oh,
I have a Unity test that I give all applicants, whether they be technical artists working in Unity, whether they be programmers, whether they be designers or anything like that. They need to show competence. If they say they've got Unity experience, they have to prove they've got some Unity experience.
And are these separate tests or just a single test that you can?
No, separate tests. It depends on the job you're applying for, and it depends on the level you're applying for as well. Like if you turn up and say you're a shader expert, then I'm going to get you to do a shader. I'm going to get you to show me shaders. I'm going to ask you questions. What optimizes this shader in the shader graph and things like that. I'm going to do those things to you. If you're just starting out, I want to know that you've opened Unity, that you know where the items are, that you can pop a game object in there, you know how a rigid body can do stuff and things like that. I'm going to ask you relevant questions to the job you're applying for and at a relevant level to what you're coming in at.
So if their portfolio is extensive enough, do you skip the test?
Yeah, yes. If it's a very, very for middle to senior people, I don't bother with the tests because I can work out whether they know what they're talking about just in the interview. I can quickly assess like this guy hasn't got a clue. this girl is absolutely nailing this interview because her experience has this, and this, and she's proven it just by telling me about what she's done. Like she wrote this amazing shader that makes the thing glow from a distance in just this beautiful haze or whatever. These things count. But yeah, I don't make super senior people take tests, because if you're a super senior person and you're not even super middle to senior person and you're applying for a job and you can't do that job, you're not going to be in that job very long. Whereas for a lot of entry people,
you're a very good
it's a case of you want to make sure, business run. When you're an entry person, I want to make sure you don't know what you're talking about half the time. So I want to make sure that you can actually do the things that you're saying that you can do. Yeah. Whereas somebody who's been in industry, worked in a company for 3-4 years building something, that company would have got rid of them if they're rubbish. Why wouldn't I just take them at their word and then just interview them and work it out just by verbal communication?
Makes sense.
Yeah, I find they're really handy when it comes to new grads, like just people getting straight into the industry, because you can see whether or not they actually absorbed the stuff that they were learning and used it, or if they just kind of like checked off, got an A in the class, turned in all the homework, but they still can't give you code that compiles. Because I've seen a lot of that. I mean, one of the places I was at, they had code tests for everybody coming in, all the way up to senior and management level positions. And a majority of the people submitting for those positions would submit code that didn't compile. So it's a very simple task and the code wouldn't compile, just because there's so many people applying for the jobs. And this was, again, one of those where, like you said, you're getting multiple hundreds of submissions for a job after it's been up for a week. And there's just lots of people totally failing, not able to get the job done, or, like I said, even have the code compile, which I thought was interesting. Like,
and on the point of tests, one thing I also do is my tests are also to see where you're at. So there are questions in there that entry to middle people will start to struggle with, and they'll ask questions about it. It's also to let that person come out of their shell and ask me questions about that thing and work out where they're at in there. So there's things like, give me 3 methods of optimization in just Unity alone, not in the code itself. And then they'll start talking about it. And entry level people will struggle with those sort of questions. But once they start talking about it and I talk to them about it, because after I've done the coding or the coding test and the Unity test and things like that, I'll go through those questions with that person. And usually I can pull that out of them, even if they don't know the specifics themselves. So, but I want to see where you're at as well when you're coming to the company, because then it lets me know, I can put you in and not have to hire and hold you every day, or I could put you in, I could assign somebody to you to be a representative of somebody to tutor you and all the rest of it as you're building up, because you're a class act.
So some good, just some trap questions to get some introspection and how they think, how they go through a thought process, how they problem solve, things like that. And so you can better identify how you would have to interact with them and where you can place them and how they would interact with other people in a project, obviously. Good stuff.
Yeah. Leading questions are a great resource in tests, as long as you use them that way. If you just put questions and you're like, half the people aren't going to get this and I'm never going to talk to them about it, why is that in your test? Like, you're just wasting their time, you're wasting your time. If you put them in there in the leading questions that enable you to be able to bring the person out of the shell, to talk to them and have a conversation. Because as Joseph Story said earlier, some people find it hard to get out of their shell, but sometimes when you're interviewing them, if you can get them into that technical space where they're just talking about technical stuff and they don't fear talking about their personal stuff, and the passion comes out and then they start opening up. So sometimes those leading questions are in there just for that moment that I can start talking to them. They open up and suddenly the whole interview has become a conversation and they're really comfortable. Because when I interview people, I want them to be comfortable. Like these interviewers that are like, you want to make them uncomfortable and see how they sweat. No, they're not coming in for a sales job. They're coming in for a job where you basically want them to develop. You want them to come out of their shell. You want them to be open, honest, and all the rest. So it's a good way when people are shy to bring them out. And once you have that conversation, they're really happy about that. Mm-hmm. And then they move on and go, that was a really good interview. I had a great conversation about this. If you hire them, the first day they come in, they're buzzing. They're not scared. They're really excited to come in and do the work.
I think it's also beneficial to try to create the type of back and forth you would have at work anyway. So if it's not a stressful job, why make the interview stressful? Because that's not, like, you don't need to see how they're going to respond when the grenade's thrown in the trench, like, because that's not what the work is. The work is us talking about creative stuff and having fun and pushing forward. Of course, things will always get heated because that's how people are, but like, I think just having a comfortable interview, getting them talking excited, seeing how they work, seeing how you guys work off each other, stuff like that is good stuff.
My personal favorite strategy, the one thing I do every time, it's my favorite thing to do, is I hunt for rants. So to me, the biggest indicator of somebody I want to work with is I'll throw out really open-ended questions, like things like what was your favorite thing you worked on the last project that you did, or what was the most frustrating part of it. And the reason why is because I'm looking for someone to say, oh, I had this project and I had to do an X, and oh god, so I have to use this system and the API doesn't have this exposed, and it's because once they start doing that, if this is someone who's solved a problem, had to research it, demonstrates they went down a rabbit hole, knows like a kind of arcane information about something, and that's exactly what you want. And to me, I find that's the most valuable, because there's a difference between people who have like followed the guides and tutorials step by step versus somebody who has hit an actual problem and had to actually solve it to themselves. And the best way to do that is to find someone who will like rant about a topic. And that also ties into what you were saying earlier about people that coming out of their shell. Nothing like removes stress from a room than like the bonding of a shared problem. So if you've got somebody talking about how they had to deal with this really annoying bug in Unity, and you're like, I know that bug. That bug sucks. It's eaten hours of my life. There's suddenly this moment of, okay, we both get this. This is a thing that we've done. We can relate to it. And if they're willing to kind of be open-minded about that, it also, to me, highlights the difference between people who are aware that they don't have to hide all their flaws. Because another thing you can find is people who try to put on this air of perfection. And to what Salim was saying, that's not conducive to what actual work life's going to be like. People are going to make mistakes, and people who are willing to laugh about how they wasted 4 hours hunting down a weird bug is like, shows you're human, also shows you're willing to talk about the process, and tells me that you're aware of, niche complicated things. And there's like so much information baked into just letting someone rant for a little bit about an issue on a past project.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So we got time for a couple more questions, and I've left one up here just for fun. It asks if Dave wants to share his coder tests.
Yeah,
I assume you don't want to share out the entire test, but maybe, I don't know, maybe you do.
So most people seem to be on here asking about entry-level jobs and stuff like that. So let me give you a couple of examples of things you'll get with those sort of interviews. Things like, tell me the difference between on collision enter and on trigger enter. Tell me why you would have the is kinematic flag ticked on a rigid body component.
What's serialized field for?
Yeah, give me some attributes that are used in Unity. Just reading through some of these, but explain what a skybox is. Just basic stuff that you can come out with. And then there are the ones that are a little bit more open-ended. Things like I just said, you've got draw calls. How are you going to minimize them? What is atlasing? Why are we going into that? What are the optimization steps you can go through? If they're coming in as a coder as well, you'll give them some things and say, yeah, look at this code. Tell me what's wrong with it. And there's a big, if they don't notice there's a find object of type in the update loop, then they've got issues. But it's things like that come in that you can open them up. So they're the ones that are like, tell me how we optimize. And that's the opening up questions. And then they're I need to know, the basics, like what's the is kinematic flag ticked on that rigid component for, rigid body for. And yeah, the on collision enter, on trigger enter. I'm just reading the little physics bit of the
Would
question.
You guys be interested in like reviewing some coder tests sometime, maybe next week or the week after, or grab a couple like online tests that are out there? Because there are a bunch of them that are out there leaked, and we just kind of like go over them, read through the questions, answer them, and kind of chat about them a little bit and see like which ones make sense as questions, and kind of give people some insight into what those look like and how you might answer them. I guess seems like it could be fun. I see a lot of those up there all the time, and I just look at them by myself. It's kind of boring.
When you're looking at those ones, make sure they're up to date as well, because I've seen ones before that are like Unity 4. Very old ones that are asking that don't exist anymore. How would you create a mechanism because it now exists? Whereas we used to have to actually make that back in the day. So yeah.
Yeah, well, if people are interested in that, let me know. Just drop something in chat or hit the thumbs up button a bunch afterwards or something, and maybe we'll do that. That could be fun. Just kind of going through some of those common coder test questions. Slim likes it.
I was gonna say, I will say, like, for people who are worried about that, honestly, go to Udemy, type in Unity, and like pick any of the 2 or 3 of the top courses. They'll be about $10 each. If you just follow those through, do them once verbatim as the course says to do it, then do it a second time and try to change it and do it yourself from scratch, you'll already pass any beginner interview any of us will give you, because it'll demonstrate. Most of those starting courses on things like Udemy will touch every aspect to some degree. You will do prefabs, you will do some animation, you'll do some audio, and we're not looking for gotchas. We're just saying, can you use the engine to the point that when there's specific stuff we do want to talk about, we don't have to go and explain what an audio mixer is, because that'll take in a load of time. So just follow any of the top 3, 4, 5-ish Udemy things on Unity, and you'll be fine. That's it.
I wanted to mention too the Unity Learn and certification stuff. I think if you can pass those certification exams, it'll definitely give you the confidence. I was thinking about it because I'm going to be getting to do a little bit of work on one tomorrow. So thinking the certification exams are kind of fresh in my mind. But I think if you can pass either the beginner one, you probably pass any beginner test getting into the jobs. And then same with kind of the intermediate one. From what I've seen of them, I haven't seen the finals of the intermediate, but the beginner test, I'd say if you can pass that, you should be able to pass any entry level code test that's actually appropriate. I mean, some people's entry level code tests, like you said, they just want to make you struggle, and they ask ridiculous questions that they know because it happened to be a system they were working on when they wrote the question, but they didn't know right before that, that kind of stuff. But in general, most of them, if you can beat the cert, I think you could probably pass those tests no problem. So if you're looking for like validation that you can. And to be fair, like I used to personally like not value certifications at all, just in general, until I saw managers keep putting in front of me people who had had these certifications. They're like, oh, well, they got the certification. Check this one out. They got a certification. Like, all right, fine. And I realized that like, while it doesn't do a whole lot for me, because I know that without seeing what the actual certification is and having it, it's really hard to value it. But having seen the certifications there and seeing the people going through and getting sent to me because they had them, I think there's actually a lot more value there than I used to see personally. But again, I'm probably biased because I also got to help contribute to those certifications as well. Have you guys seen anything like what are you guys' thoughts on those? Like just general like Unity or code certifications, or any of that stuff?
I did get asked 2 years ago whether I had a Unity certification when somebody was looking at me for a job, and I was like, no. And they're like, oh well, we're looking for Unity certifications, and I was like, been using it for 11 years. Does that work?
You would definitely have no problem passing the certification
exam. Did they say, 11 years and you still can't pass the test?
Still haven't done it yet. Yeah, just haven't got around to it. My time's really busy.
So you've just been doing it illegally the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, terrible. I've just been doing it wrong for 11 years. It's fun.
Yeah. I got certified with the first Unity certification, and it's simple. It's really easy. So I don't know how much it's worth.
You're also building an RPG.
Well, yeah, but this was also a few years ago when I was way worse than I am now. I'm still not that good.
Yeah, so I don't know. I thought it was an interesting thing, and it's interesting that you got asked about that too. I've been asked about it too in the past, and I was like, no. I was like, those came way later than I started using Unity, but I think for a beginner developer, it could help kind of set you aside a little bit. But they're definitely not cheap.
I would say it's a benefit, but it's not an excluder for me. Yeah. Like I won't turn somebody down because they don't have it. But if somebody has it, it's like, oh, good.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't hurt. It's definitely
it doesn't hurt,
but it's not gonna.
It doesn't hinder for me if you don't have it.
Yeah, I'm also biased by the fact that I was already using Unity for years before they came out. So I was like, I don't tend to take them very seriously. One thing I will say though is, and this is just a personal thing, is on Pluralsight, they do certification things themselves. If you have the Unity certification on Pluralsight, that means literally nothing to me because that certification is nonsense. It is the way Pluralsight does it. Like, Pluralsight's great, one of the best websites ever. I highly recommend it multiple times, but their certification system is hilariously bad. It's the creator of a course just arbitrarily picks a bunch of things and asks you like quiz questions, often like based on the names they chose their variables. It's nonsense. And so by the end of that, you could easily just like checkbox your way through that thing and get a high score. And like, it doesn't mean anything. Like, it's, yeah. So that one in particular to me just makes my eyes roll, because I've taken that multiple times, and it's very easy to get into like the top X percentile based on literally, can you read the screen in front of you? Like, it's not.
Yeah, I'd say the Unity one's definitely better than that. So I check it out. I don't know. Like I said, I'm biased though, so yeah.
You're not biased. There's no way.
Go with that. So, were there any last questions you guys wanted to hit before we wrap things up?
There was one that made me chuckle, so I wanted to bring it up. The object-oriented one. There was. Do you need to know?
Who asked that one? I'll find it. Orion.
It's gone off the screen, so I can't see it. It's one about the design principles and how much you need to know. Yeah, there you go.
This one right here. Is it necessary to be fluent in all the major OO design principles coming into an entry-level job? Definitely. You need to be an expert at them all, right? That's what you're going to say, Jason?
Of course. Yeah, so what I was going to say is, not only is it not necessary to be fluent, it is literally impossible. Because I'm sorry, if you're going into an entry-level job, you don't know most design principles.
Yeah.
You just don't. Like, you may be able to read the books, you may be able to quote me the lines in the thing, but from personal experience, I was, more than anyone I've ever met, the guy who could like fast just list off every line written in all of the books about design patterns. I could give you the blurb verbatim that was written under every paragraph, under each pattern, and I still didn't have a clue what I was doing, because I was just like, oh, well, when you need your application boundaries to be composited to the, I didn't know what I was talking about. I was just quoting the thing and I was applying the nonsense. Yeah, it's gibberish, right? And it's a lot of, like, design patterns are something that all of these principles and things come into play when you have problems. And I've said this before, you have to hit the problem to know the problem, to understand why the solution exists, to be able to apply the solution, to know why it's a solution in the first place. Everything you read in the books is just going to be gibberish words from people that you'll go, oh, well, shoulders of giants, I guess if I do the things they do, my code will be better. No, and this comes back to the same metaphor I use all the time. If you watch a doctor heal somebody and they happen to be using, like, put a plaster on someone's arm, you might go, aha, health equals plaster on arm. If someone comes in with a broken leg, I'll plaster their arm. You have no idea what you're doing. You're just watching someone do it, you're assuming it's good, and you'll apply it to your stuff indiscriminately. So not only is it not, you don't need to do it, you won't. It's impossible. You are going to be terrible at it until you've actually done it in a practical setting. So don't worry.
Yeah, just get at least a brief understanding of them, know that they exist, and that they solve problems, so that you know what to look for when you finally hit those problems is kind of the limit you want to be at. If you can explain what solid principles mean loosely, like, or at least understand the single responsibility principle, I think you're probably good at the entry level. Understanding you want to keep your code small, clean, and, like, dry concept, the very basic stuff. I wouldn't worry about the more advanced things.
I think the key word in all of that is just, is it necessary to be fluent? No, I think it's just necessary to know about, be able to make at least a base level, maybe explain it or read verbatim the blurbs. It might be a good idea, but I don't think
I'm not going to lie.
Master
if someone says the phrase Uncle Bob in the middle of an interview, they'll get some extra points from me, because it means they care enough about it to look into, how do I get better at the thing I do that I want to do for a living, and they'll have done some homework, and they'll have learned the names of the people who teach the things that make you better. That's enough to indicate to me that they're at least looking in the right direction. But I don't need to know, like, again, don't quote me the book back at me, because I can tell. Like, I literally tutor people. I know when they're lying. And if you start telling me you understand all this stuff, you're lying to yourself and you're lying to me, and that's not a good look.
So I popped up a follow-up question, because I think that it's worth noting something. It says, would object pooling be considered a design pattern? And I would say Yes, pooling is something that you're gonna, and this is kind of one of those things that an entry level engineer would actually get a lot of benefit from, is understanding this. And I think that it's worth noting that there's the game programming patterns site and book, and it's not Unity specific, but it actually covers kind of OO patterns in a very gaming context to solve game specific problems that it might actually make sense, that are a little bit less abstract, where it's actually saying, here's the game, here's the problem, and here's the design pattern solution in a game design pattern solution essentially around it. So I would look at something like that, or other maybe Unity game design pattern stuff, and use that as more of a starting point than necessarily like the solid principles or Uncle Bob stuff that's a little bit more abstract and a little bit more, I guess, advanced. And here you're kind of tied down into very direct game examples that have an immediate application, like object pooling. It's super valuable. And if you're an entry level engineer that understands object pooling, it's a lot better than an entry level engineer that doesn't, right? Just, it's nice.
And
it's a good
if you're ever confused about what is a design pattern, it's actually surprisingly straightforward despite all the technobabble. It basically is known solutions to known problems. It is things people do that have a name, that are common approaches to problems. And that's the thing that really bothers me that people get wrong. The fact that you could say, is object pooling a pattern? The fact that you can say two words and we all know what you mean, and we're not talking about details. We're not talking about did they use a dictionary for this? Are they ordering? It doesn't matter what you're doing. You've said a phrase, and we all know what that means. It is a pattern of practice. It's a thing that people do. But just keep in mind, a design pattern is a principle. It is not the lines of code. And I get really frustrated when I see people talk about design patterns and think it's the exact lines as they read in the thing. It is, for example, factories are the abstraction between the creation of things from the other stuff, right? It's that separation. Now, there are multiple kinds of factories, and there's different ways to do it and whatever, and there's a general rule to how it should look, but it's not the lines of code. It is the abstraction. It is a factory is a thing that separates instantiation from the usage of the thing. So don't worry about the details. Things like pooling, yes, it is a pattern. It is a thing that solves a problem that has a name that you can apply and discuss with people.
Concept and application. Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect explanation of it. So I guess it's about time for us to wrap things up, and I already shared a link to Andrew's stream that's coming up, and I'm going to drop it in chat again, and it's in the description. You're going to be going live. What are you building now? What's today's stream?
Redoing the game modules, so the coding, backend, data management, etc., for setting up stats, skills, items, and then using that in any project and connecting them and automatically doing all their math connections between stats that affect this stat and this stat and this way and this other way, and rounding and making it basically easier to do fairly complex RPG, but really any sort of stats system and skill system that all are intertwined with items and effects and mods and whatnot.
Wow, that sounds really cool. So everybody should definitely check that out. Go learn how to build all that stuff out. And then we could do that inventory stuff sometime soon too. And I guess we'll be back next week on Halloween with maybe some kind of special stuff. Dave, I still want to build a Halloween thing with you sometime. Like, I got all these like ideas of stuff that I want to do, and I never get around to doing it. But now that I'm talking to you, I was like, why didn't I just hit up Dave before? Like, there could have been like a whole display set up and all kinds of crazy stuff, and kids getting electrocuted and pit traps. And so we're going to have to figure something out sometimes.
I was meant to do a video on like the old Sparky thing where I actually did electrocute people in VR, but I haven't got around to doing that. But yeah, I'll be doing some more Halloween stuff on my channel at some point soon. If you want to jump in, we'll do one together.
Yeah, we got to do something fun together sometime soon. I missed that. And then, Salim, are you going to be around for Sunday for Halloween?
I will try. I fly back to Texas like the next day, and Halloween is my wife's like favorite holiday, so I might be booked all day.
Okay. Well, if not, I think it'd be interesting to get some of the questions that designers get too, like the designer tests, like an example.
Oh yeah.
Some of those, if we can find some just example designer tests for what they do to get into that, because I know it's very, very different from the programmer ones. So it'll be fun.
And then, depends.
Yeah.
Depends.
Well, it'll be different at least. Right? Yeah.
You know what is awesome is we almost made it through a whole stream without someone asking about Singleton, and now there's been like 3 in the past.
The last moment. Yeah.
Almost made it, and now they're just popping up like crazy.
Singleton Sunday next week. Let's talk about Singletons the whole time. All right. Any last words from you, Jason?
No, but if you're doing a Singleton stream, you can be alone doing it because I ain't joining you.
It's all Singletons. It'll be Singletons versus Story.
I am electric guitar.
I am. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Please, if you don't mind, hit the thumbs up button, share the stream, go check out Andrew's live stream right after this and the courses and all the links down below. And we'll see you again next Sunday.
Bye.